Good evening and welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting for Tuesday, February 4th, 2014. I just reminded this meeting is being recorded, and we'd like to start our meeting off with just a moment of silence in just in appreciation of our brave servicemen and women that are serving overseas in Afghanistan. Thank you. We've got 3 appointments tonight. We've got the Council on Aging. Roberta's here at 7 o'clock. We've got the Town Bylaw and Charter Review Committee is meeting with us at 7:20, and we have the Superintendent of Schools. We'll be here at 7:35, and then we've got a number of action items to cover. We've got a number of items to cover as far as the warrant articles, to discuss them, and a few other things as we go along. So without further ado, I guess, Roberta, you ready? All right. Excellent. Fire away. Ooh. Oh, got little handouts. Here we go. Yep, thank you. Thank you. Oh, good. Valentine dance. Yep, excellent. Oh.
Okay. Hello.
Hi.
I'm here to talk about my budget.
Okay.
Okay. So first thing I want to say, though, I just want to say that the Council on Aging has the best staff out there. The best staff, best volunteers, the best board, and it's that makes us so successful. So I just want to put that on the record. So the Council on Aging continues to grow in population. Information from Town Clerk in 2013, there's 2,212 people over the age of 60, and the 2010 census had us at 2010. So obviously we're all aging, and the 60-plus population is growing. In this past year, we had 19,700 visits for programs in and out of the building. We are so very close to having 100 people per day. We range anywhere from 89 to 96. And I know that we're over 100 because a lot of people decide that they're too busy, they have to get to their program, and they don't scan in. So we're doing really well there. So my budget for fiscal year 15. It's more than the 2.5% increase that was recommended at the budget hearing in the fall. The increase is attributed to adding 7.5 hours of outreach in addition. So that would make that position 37.5 hours. So in terms of full-time people, it would be myself, my transportation coordinator, and the outreach position going up to 37.5. So some people might ask, what does outreach actually do? And it's a huge program within the Council on Aging, and I'm happy to say that I was the first outreach worker back in 1997, and that was at 10 hours per week. So outreach provides home assessments, information and referral, assistance with fuel and food stamp applications. The initial assistance is also directed to outreach for health insurance information and then referred on to our Shine counselor. Outreach works with identifying housing options, individual and group support counseling. Cheryl facilitates a low vision support group and a caregiver support group. She works to identify and support the caregivers and our club clients, and case manages this past year over 80 individual cases. She works with the Department of Transitional Assistance, Social Security, and the probate courts for individuals as needed. And she works collaboratively with the police and fire departments, the veteran service officer, and the Shine counselor, which is one person. And currently outreach is 30 hours a week, and I'm aware of the caseload, the individual and family requests, and 30 hours is just not enough, and I ask that that be increased to 37.5. So that's the basis of the increase on my budget. The additional increase is just the normal step increases that the positions will receive. The operation, the building itself, the operations, that is pretty much, I think it's $1 under than last year's budget. Any questions?
I don't know that I have a question, but I do want to mention to you that Park and Rec was here about their budget already, And I asked Jim Schneider if he would be willing to consider taking on mowing and the yard work at the center, because they have a person who does that. And I guess their problem is that they're out straight with stuff, so that he's willing to talk about it, I guess, is...
Well, I think that from my conversations with Mike is that the highway department is going to help us with that.
Oh, good.
Which is great, because the lawn needs some serious attention.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but the problem with that is there's no water, really. You know, there's no sprinkler system, so I don't know how much we can actually do to it. Maybe, I'm not sure. You know, I'm not a landscaper, but if you can't water the grass that you plant, it's probably not going to grow with all the turkeys and crows that we have and so forth.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep.
That can, by the way, that's subject to additional restoration of a position that he cut out of his budget before, so
Right.
it's not a guarantee.
Right.
That would be
So I'm just going to just detail a few
Sure.
other
Yep.
little things,
Sure. Yep.
and
Okay.
then I want to move on to the other subject. So just about the building itself, it's beginning to show its age. I had a recent conversation with Mike about that. And in the last year, we used tax work-off volunteers to help with some inside painting, like the molding, the woodwork. You know, it's kind of getting bumped and scraped. So, and the outside really doesn't need to be painted, but it really needs to be cleaned, and some of the trim needs to be painted. So we'll work on that this spring. And some of the repairs that we've done to the building, most of the repairs to the building have been provided from the rental income. We still rent about 2 to 3 times a month. So some of our big repairs, we had to take all those pendulum lights down. I think I told you, Pete, taking all the lights down in the hall, and you have to just like take the whole thing apart and get the lift from the school department and everything. It's a big job. That cost a lot of money, $2,300 actually. We had to repair the HVAC unit above the craft room. We needed 2 new batteries for our fire alarm system, new battery and pads for our defibrillator, and replacement of a bathroom faucet to the tune of $400 because they're those electric ones. So we've had some significant repairs. The respite program, just give you an update on that because it's a great program, and I'm very thankful to the Metro West Health Foundation who's funded it for 2 years. In 2013, we've had 18 clients, and over the 2 years, we've had a total of 22. We currently have 10 active participants, and we put that into a slot. We call it slots. Each half day of participation is a slot.
Okay.
So we can have a maximum of 32 per week.
per week, okay,
And
yeah.
right now we're at 21. We were at a high of 29 for several weeks, but unfortunately we lose clients to long-term care facilities or they pass on. So the program's not covering its expenses yet, but we're pretty close. In 2013, we brought in $28,101, and our expenses were $30,972. So we're not really far off. We're pretty close.
Roberta, how do you market that program? How do you let people know that it exists?
Yeah, we did a big marketing campaign probably about last year, starting our second year with the Metro West, because that was part of the grant. I updated the website, so it's on the website. We are on the Alzheimer's Association website. We're a member of the Alzheimer's Foundation of America. I always talk about it on Cable 8. We have brochures we send out, do like mailings to the VNAs. We do it to primary care physicians. Grace goes around and to the neighboring council on agings and talks to them. And it's really now a word of mouth. A lot of people are referring people. They know someone who could benefit, and we're expecting someone to come in next week who heard it from Mr. Harney actually referred someone to the program. So that's starting to catch on, and I think we provide a great service there, and it's doing a great job. It's wonderful.
Well, it takes a while anyways, I think,
Yeah.
to want to catch, because this
Yeah.
is only not even your full second year, right? I mean, did you start sometime in
Well, it'll be March
2012?
20th. Will be 2 years.
Okay, yeah, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So with the funding from the Metro West Health Foundation, I have 3 pay cycles remaining with the second grant. And then I'm eligible for a third grant. And I'm going to write that, but it has to be for less money than I got for the second grant. So I'm going to write for one staff position. So hopefully that will come through for me.
Good.
And then I recently, January 31st, I submitted a grant to the Alzheimer's Foundation of America to assist with transportation for the program. And I'm not sure if I'll get that one or not. Just in transportation, in 2013, we provided 2,700 round trips, drove nearly 8,500 miles, and we just acquired a new bus, which is roomier and much safer and easier access, especially for our club participants.
Yep.
And I think that's it on the Council on Aging. I'm going to say that we provide unique services. People don't really know all that we do, but we do a lot, and I hope that you recognize that and support my budget request.
Mr. Stewart, just a couple of things. I was able to go to the Council of Aging meeting a couple of weeks ago. First of all, your staff is just incredibly caring. And that clearly comes across, and I know in listening to that, the amount of work that the outreach person does is just incredible for that amount of hours. It's 30, you want to bring it up to 37. Right now she's in over her head with that. The other thing which you didn't mention, which I think has to be brought out, is the amount of outside money that you bring in. You have the use of FOSSI, listening to how you put together the funding of your bus was just incredible, of where you're pulling all different sources of revenue from. I think you do an incredible job of trying to live within your budget and use all these other different sources of volunteer labor that you're using that help around the building itself. And what a blessing those that help with FOSSI. I think they gave you $10,000.
$10,000, yeah.
Just on the bus alone. And the amount of our seniors that are using the facility, it's just a beautiful facility. And from what we had before, down at the FAF Center there, I mean, what just a great facility. And the number of programs that you run is just incredible. And you're bringing in not just Medfield, but you're bringing in people from other areas as well. I think that's a clear show that what a great program that we're running here in the town of Medfield. And you're bringing in, I think your rent, if I'm reading, almost $10,000 on the use of the hall, just on the income that's coming in. And that's giving you a balance, if I'm reading this right, of over $6,000.
Right, it's down to 4, though, because of the repairs, but yes.
Right,
Yep.
and then I heard you mention, I didn't see it here, but, and I noticed when they had the State Hospital Vision Program, you have some concerns with the PA system.
Yes. Oh, thank you for saying that.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Is that in the budget?
Well, it's not in the budget, but I put in a capital budget request. I'm working with Chuck Conti, who's head of the Friends Group, and so we received one quote on a sound system, and it was for $18,000. But the room can be 2 rooms, because of that partition. So this particular system would be able to work both rooms if you had 2 different programs going on, which would be ideal. So we're going to work on getting other quotes. And it is true at that visioning, because I had to bring out the old speakers that we used at our opening back in 2008, because the speakers we currently have, they just need to go. You can't even.
I think you got to bring in more income too. More people are going to use that hall with a better PA system that's in there. And the other thing you do a tremendous job on is getting the number of grants, the time that you take and your staff takes to write these grants, which is not easy. You're bringing in just an incredible amount of money outside of the budget. I just got to congratulate you.
Thank you. We do have a good chunk of change there, so it's pretty exciting. Yeah. So thank you.
Good. I know the floor eventually is going to be one of the things I'm sure you're going to want to work on at some point to refinish
the floor. Yeah, I'm hoping for. Actually, I did at the last meeting that Richard was at. Our census dropped really low between the middle of December to the middle of January.
Yeah.
So I have always thought that you do the floors in the summer, but that's like one of our busiest times. So I think next winter that I'll look
Yeah.
for doing that floor,
Yeah,
because I
that'd be
think it
good.
needs to be done.
Yeah, well, it takes it's hard, because you have a lot of people traipsing in. You can't help it. Everyone
Yep.
drags stuff in.
The
particularly this time of
chairs,
year.
when you set up, we set up the halls all the time for
It just gets
rentals.
scraped, yeah.
And, the tables and the chairs, it
Yeah, it just
has
gets really beat up.
yeah.
But no, it's good. Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and it's always great having meetings there, anyways, because it's a great room, as you're well aware.
Yeah.
It's so nice to have all the windows and all the natural light.
Yeah.
If you happen to be there during the day, it's fabulous.
nice, yeah.
Makes you feel nice and airy and stuff.
And the parking's good.
And that's
It's,
true. Yeah, it
Parking's
is.
good,
Everything's very
yes.
it's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
it's a perfect meeting.
Yeah, we
place.
noticed today, I was made aware, one of our lights in the parking lot
Yeah.
is like tilting. Not sure why it's tilting, but
Can I just ask, and somebody actually asked me when the voting took place there, we only have one driveway that comes in. Has any thought been given to having an entrance and then an exit out the backside? Is
yeah,
that?
I don't know. Do you know, Lou, why that was designed that way?
Never designed, never thought of it back when we
Yeah.
designed it.
Oh, okay.
Especially with now, because the voting is there, you get congestion, and it looks like if you had the entrance and the far end, the exit, you'd have a nice
that would be
flow that
nice.
would go there.
That'd be nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe it was the case you didn't think of
Money
that.
back then.
Yeah.
We- We were squeezing nickels to get the building
Sure.
built.
I wonder if that's something maybe with our highway we could look at,
Chop that.
or maybe the police chief or someone to see what the best way, the
Yeah,
flow of
we could
traffic
certainly
would
do
be.
that, yeah.
I'll
I'm
look at
trying
Sure,
to
there's
think, I
some
thought there
lines
was
under there,
another
though.
reason we did that.
Yeah, I think so
but-
too.
And I don't know whether it was because you would give up parking spaces to do it, or they just thought it would be better control, but it seemed to me there was another reason, but I can't think, I can't remember what it was.
Utilities or something?
I think of
don't
it
know.
at 2:00 in the morning, I'll call you, Lou.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, anything else you wanted to go over? No?
Oh,
That's
no,
it?
but I just, yes, I do have something else.
Okay.
I can't find my notes, though.
Uh-oh.
I'd like to make a point. We do,
Yes, Lou.
Here's the mic there.
Oh, yeah. Wes will give you the mic.
Is on. I'd like to make one point. We do need the extra 7 hours for the
Oh, for the outreach
outreach worker.
yeah.
It's really important. We're doing more and more for the seniors. We're getting questions from people your age. What about mom and dad?
Mm-hmm.
And the young lady is just straight out to cover it right. Thank you.
Okay, and just one last little thing. So I asked to add this to the agenda, but I just want to speak to you about the housing issue in Medfield, or lack of, for 55-plus age-appropriate housing. And it seems like it's a very common topic of conversation at the center all the time. And I think, we see the people that have moved to Norfolk, and the people that have moved to Walpole, and it would be nice for people when they're 75 to be able to move someplace in their community to live the rest of their life in their town, and they consider it their town. So as a member of the State Hospital Advisory Committee, I'm aware of what's happening at Medfield State Hospital. But, that's in the future. And I'm also on the Medfield Housing Authority, and we have that piece of land there that we're progressing slowly on in terms of
Yeah.
expanding in that direction. But that's subsidized housing, and that's controlled by the state, independent of really Medfield in
Yep.
some respects. So the conversation this evening is just to bring the housing issue front and center. And I'm going to ask Tony Santori just to come up, if you will, for a minute. But I just want to throw out to you that there are 2 lots of town near the senior center, and the senior center is very active and vibrant. And I just think that maybe some consideration could be given to those 2 lots behind the Kingsbury Club and the Hinckley land that's next to us, and that you might consider appointing a committee that could look at 55-plus housing in those potential areas that we could look at a creative way to provide housing that might benefit the town and certainly benefit the residents of Medfield sooner than later. And I have some ideas in my head, but I just thought if we could just begin to kind of have a committee and work and look at something that's maybe new and innovative and a prototype, and maybe be, you know, we talk about the club at our senior center, and it's really doing quite well, and it was a new idea, but maybe there's some things unique that we could do for the town of Medfield that offers housing for people and then benefits the town maybe financially in some way too. And I'm sure it's out there. It just, you know, you need many minds together. So, Tony?
Thank you.
Let me give you guys a handout. Know where I'm coming from.
There's a Tony. I got it, Tony. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Roberta. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tony Centauri. I live at 27 Long Meadow Road. I've been a resident of Medfield for 46 years. Hard to believe. And since 2000, approximately, my wife and I have been retired and have enjoyed living in Medfield, and especially the addition of the senior center. Been a great addition to the town, and I think it's kept a lot of people here, and particularly the seniors, to stay in Medfield. And we're very appreciative of the work that Roberta does. She's a great director. She's very vibrant. We're lucky to have her. We want to keep her here. As Roberta alluded to, there are a lot of seniors here who, you know, the house is getting to be too much, the repairs, the lawn, the plowing, the maintenance, and they'd like to stay in town, but they'd like to move into something small, a 55-plus community. And you've heard the story about Norfolk, River's Edge, and Pin Oaks. People are there, we know, but they always come back to Medfield. And I've talked to people at the center and said, you know, why can't we get something for 55-plus housing? There is discussion of Lot 3 on Ice House Road. I know somebody has come up with an idea of putting in an indoor soccer field. But what I was hoping to do, and it's on that second sheet, the helpful town actions, to have the town actively consider 55-plus housing on any available town-owned property. Also, maybe the town could inventory town-owned land that might be suitable for 55-plus housing. Consider any changes in the zoning laws, leverage state and federal funds to help make 55-plus housing a reality, incentivize builders and developers so they would come to Medfield and propose such a community, and maybe appoint a committee to investigate some of the options. I know that the Lot 3 has been under consideration. I have walked through that property. I see ledge outcrop. And I also understand that the property to the east, the so-called Hinckley property, is also owned by the town. And its proximity to the senior center would make either one of these locations ideal for some kind of a senior housing. Now, I realize that it's going to take a developer to look at the property to see how many, what land you can develop, how you can arrange the housing units, whether they're attached, whether they're single individual houses, and how many units you can get on there, and also getting access. But there'll probably be a lot of other places in town where there's such property, either in town-owned or private property, that the developer might be interested if there was enough demand in the town. So I'm asking the town, maybe you're already doing these things, to keep that in mind, think about it as things come up. It may not become the first thing you think of that you want to put in senior housing, 55-plus housing, but I think it would be a great addition. It would keep people in town. I personally don't want to move to Norfolk if I don't have to. I'd rather stay in Medfield. I've been active in my retirement in town. I've been on a lot of committees. I know a lot of people. I'm almost a townie, but I would like to spend the rest of my years here in the town, not have to move out someplace else and start over. So anyway, that's my pitch.
Good. Thank you. Excellent. Thanks.
I think that's an excellent idea, Tony, and Roberta, and thank you for bringing it forward. I guess my question to Mike and Chris is: anybody actively planning this sort of thing, or should we be appointing a committee? Because I think that somebody should be doing it in town.
Well, I think, I know Tony was talking to Sarah to get some of the information he put together. I think that's something probably the planning department ought to be looking into, and they probably could use some assistance from, I know we have plenty of people in real estate in town that probably would enjoy working on something like that. So why don't we ask Sarah if she could come up with some sort of a recommendation as to how you might proceed on that?
Sure.
The other thing that, and I've been talking about this myself for a long time. One of the reasons I ran for selectman was just that. So many people I know now live in Norfolk and other communities that they come back here, they go to church here, they use the library here, they're here in Medfield all the time. But what's bothering me is we have 2 articles on the town meeting that's the exact same that we had a year ago at town meeting. You have Park and Rec is looking to use a field there. You have Mr. Borelli looking to put a indoor soccer. We haven't made much progress in the past year, and it's going to be very difficult to go to town meeting and you're given this either-or choice. I think it's important to get, I thought the Economic Development Committee would be the best avenue, but I think we need a committee to look at there's all this property, and it's very hard without some type of a master plan. We don't know what's going to come up at the hospital. That's a question mark that's up there. But it just seems to make a lot of sense with the center being located right there with property. I know there's some wetlands in Lot 3, and I know there's some ledge in the former Hinckley property. But I think we need, Mr. Chairman, to actually develop a committee. Maybe it's with Sarah and the planning board, but something and soon to begin to look at and how we're going to address the issue of town meeting, because this is going to be very confusing at town meeting. We're going to be in the same circumstances we were in last year, I think.
Right. Well, I recommend going with Mike's suggestion is to have Sarah come back to us with some suggestions first, have a chance to think about it as far as how it might best be tackled for a committee. It's too late to come up with anything for town meeting anyways. We're way past the I think any type of deadlines for that, but I'd like to hear what Sarah has to say. She's the planning professional that we've hired.
Agree.
Rather than us winging it
No,
and
I
appointing
agree.
someone, or not knowing quite what we're doing.
The only problem we're going to have is town meeting with these 2 articles in with that
Yeah,
lot.
but we have them anyways, so we'll have to kind of deal with that.
The other issue that I guess I'd like to hear back from Sarah, that I've been talking to her about outside of our meetings, is the need to do a master plan for the town. And Sarah tells me that she's, in her mind, she's put that on a track where she's going to ask the capital budget committee for $25,000 a year for 5 years, so that we wouldn't get started on that for 5 years. I don't think we can wait. I think that we really should just be allocating whatever it is, $125,000 if that's the number, and getting moving on that sooner. I know that Sarah's really busy with things around the hospital and running the planning board and the zoning board of appeals, but I think that we should try to get that moving.
Right, and I think that would be good.
And so maybe when Sarah reports back to us, we could hear back from her about the issue of doing a master plan for the town. If the town does opt, as I hope they do, to purchase the Medfield State Hospital, there's going to have to be a huge amount of planning around that and the development that's going to need to take place up there, because it's not, I don't think anybody's thinking that you're just going to buy it and it's going to be open fields. The town is going to buy it and then steer it towards particular development. Sure. And so that there's going to have to be a ton of planning around that. I don't think we can wait to do the master plan for the whole town before we go forward on the Medfield State Hospital items. But I think that if we have both of those planning items in mind, that we really should try to be moving both of them along on a fast track rather than waiting for 5 years to do the master plan.
All right, we'd like to move on. We're running behind.
Thank you for bringing that forward.
What I'd like to do, Russ, if you don't mind, Jeff's just here for 2 seconds, I think, to talk to us about boilers. So I'd like to get him out of here before we tackle bylaws, if you don't mind. So I'm going to have our superintendent of schools come up and talk about Wheelock boilers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Appreciate you having me in tonight. A couple of things that we need to discuss, I guess, is the Wheelock boilers. They've been on our capital plan for the last 3 years. Recently, on January 6, MSBA, the Mass School Building Authority, sent us a letter saying that they're opening statements of interest for new schools and also repairs. So it made sense, as we discussed it, that we should look at doing a statement of interest in SOI for the repairs of the Wheelock boilers. So if we were successful in this and they accept our application, they would reimburse the town almost 40% of the cost. So it's something that needs to get done anyway, based on the age of the boilers. They're 40 years old. They're over 40 years old. The original's from 1968. We've had a lot of repairs done the last 3 years, and we've had to have it recertified the last 3 years for use. And it makes sense, I think, to go forward with this application so that if we are accepted, the state will give us the 40% reimbursement.
How long before they let you know if you're accepted or not?
Either March or April, early April. So we'll know before town meeting.
So it's quick then.
It's very quick. So it's called Accelerated Repair Program. So they want you to, if you are accepted in the program, to have everything completed within 18 months of acceptance.
Oh, good. Excellent. Good.
But what I need, if you so decide this evening, is just a vote for me to submit it.
Okay.
So there's no commitment on the town for any allocation of funds. It's just the MSBA makes school superintendents go to the Board of Selectmen to make sure they know what's going on with this, and also the school committee, and the school committee voted to submit that at their last meeting. So there's absolutely no commitment on the part of the town for this.
I would move that we vote to authorize the superintendent to submit the application as indicated.
I'll go along then. I just also want to just thank you for your foresight in holding off on the Dale Street because of the number of issues that are there. So I certainly will second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
Thank you.
Excellent.
In terms of the Dale Street, as Mr. DeSorga said, we really looked at it, the school committee and I, and said that it made sense for the community to hold off at least another year based on the potential purchases of land and also the public safety, that it just didn't fit. I mean, the timing wasn't right, that if we were accepted in March, if they accepted Dale Street, the feasibility study would go to town meeting almost the same time as the public safety, so that didn't make any sense at all.
Right.
So we're going to hold off on that, and then take a look at enrollment, because based on what happens at the state hospital or the 40B development, enrollment could shift or not. So it gives us a little bit more time to check that out and make sure we're making the right decision.
Okay, good. Excellent.
And can I just ask about a couple of things?
Sure.
On the Dale Street, then, so that, because we did the same sort of letter for Bob McGuire about Dale Street a year or two ago.
Right.
And that discussion with school building assistants just hasn't gone anywhere at this point. Is that
Correct.
what-
So every year you have to refresh that SOI, the
Oh, okay.
statement of
All right.
interest. So last year they did not. They decided not to do that, and then we were going to do that again this year. But certainly all the other
Things
priorities
like
in
that.
town,
Yeah.
certainly doesn't make sense to do that at this
Yeah,
point.
okay.
So we can refresh that at any time, whenever it makes sense and whenever the timetable makes sense for the community.
And my understanding with the Dale Street School is that it's unlikely that the school building assistants would give us money to renovate that because of the cost of doing so compared to building a new school.
I don't know, Pete. I don't know how that.
Okay.
It's who they send out that day to kind of take a look
Oh.
at it. I mean, I had a situation in my former district where we went through an SOI for roof repair, and it was a 1935 building, beautiful slate roof, but lots of issues. And when they came out to inspect it, they said, "We'll certainly think about it, but you need to put about $1 million in repairs in the building." One of them was adding an elevator because it was a two-floor building before they would allocate the funds, which just wasn't in the plan. So we said no thank you on that, and continue to live in the building that we had. But it really depends on what their criteria is at that point. And I have heard that, though. That's the same thing I heard, that they gave feedback last time they were out here.
Yep. And then the last thing that I wanted to ask you about
Sure.
was that you and I had exchanged some emails about the numbers that I was trying to get for Bill Massaro on school pupil costs
Yes.
for work that we're doing in terms of trying to get the numbers in line for the town meeting on March
Right.
10.
Right.
Is that something that, and I know the numbers, Charlie Kellner's pointed us to where the numbers are on the state website.
Right.
But we'd really like to have somebody from the school department hand us the numbers and just verify that they're the right numbers rather than our pulling them off of the state website,
Well,
if that's possible.
School districts don't calculate that, because what happens is at the end of the year report, which was just done in the town, that gets sent to the Department of Education, and they calculate that using all funds, and they certify it. So we could, if we were to develop a number, it wouldn't be the real number because it needs to be certified by the state. In fact, they're a couple years behind. The most recent numbers in the state FY12, but that's totally something that the state does. We can give you the per pupil expenditure from FY12, but we can't.
Yeah, I think, well, if that's the most current one, I guess
That's the
it would
most
be
current
good.
one.
Yep.
Unfortunately, it wouldn't be appropriate for us to do that because the number probably wouldn't be as accurate as what the state does because of the formulas they use to calculate that.
Yeah, and I think that's probably what Charlie used for the figures that he gave us in the past, and so that, I think we're just looking to get that
So looking
spreadsheet refreshed.
Sure, we could do that. We could take a look at that. I mean, certainly the FY12 number is out, and I think what he did is took a percentage of what the state aid is and calculate out what the actual cost of the taxpayer is because of the state aid. So I think he just did a percentage calculation of what that number is. We could.
But it's one of the major questions that everybody asks when the development up at the state hospital comes up is, well, how much is it going to cost us for all the new school children we're going to have, and so we need some answers for that.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's almost 12,000 per student in FY12. So.
And the enrollment's going down, I see.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. There's a decline in enrollment, but it's one of those things where you can't just say, well, the whole grade is going to be taken away because of the enrollment. It's all bits and pieces in terms of, and we're actually getting more students in than we anticipated in the lower grades right now.
Oh, you are.
So the data that we have has the drop in births. They use a birth cohort model. The 2009 was the lowest birth rate in Medfield for a long time, but it's already going back up again. So we anticipated in the 130 range for kindergarten this year based on the projections.
130.
And we're at about 155. So it was
still,
off.
that's compared to the high school classes of over 200.
Right,
so.
right. It's definitely lower.
Yeah.
It's definitely lower.
And Sarah Raposa circulated some sort of MAPC study to us recently that indicated that MAPC indicates that our school population is going to be going down up until, was it 2040, I think?
Is that what it is? But, they don't take in development and that kind of thing. When they use that birth cohort model, it's the kids that actually were born as residents of Medfield, and that's how they try to project it out. So it's not perfect science, but it gives you a pretty good indicator anyway.
Yeah.
Can you speak just briefly on, I know the school committee made the decision to go to the full-time kindergarten, how that's going to work. That's not going to come on the budget, but that's...
Correct. So that'll be a tuition-based program. So the Department of Education counts kindergarten kids as actually a half kid because when they do reimbursements for Chapter 70, there's no requirement to be in full-day kindergarten in Massachusetts. So many districts, like what we're going to do next year, they offer full-day kindergarten, but it's on a tuition basis. So we'll charge a tuition to parents that want that second half of the day, and we'll use that to offset the budget, so we'll pay for teachers, supplies, and any materials we need for that program. It's one of those things where 87% of kindergarten students in Massachusetts are in full-day kindergarten. Only 12% of Medfield kids are in full-day kindergarten. So we need to, the early literacy and early learning is so important for the long-term student achievement. So we felt it was important to get that started. And then, eventually I think the goal down the road would be like what Dover has and Sherburne. They have that all in their budget. So they count that, and it's non-tuition. But many districts around here in our general area are tuition-based. It's just not feasible in the budget to offer that because we know it's important educationally, but it's not feasible to have that in the budget when we can certainly charge tuition for that. I did a survey prior to the announcement and prior to the vote of the school committee, and 76% of Medfield parents who have incoming kindergarten students in the next 3 years agreed not only in principle of what the program would be about, but also agreed to pay tuition. So we used all that data in that decision-making process, and certainly no impact on the taxpayer.
So the way that'll work is that the town will continue to pay for half the day, and then the other half the day is tuition?
No, the town or the budget will pay for half the day and the second half of the day. So when I said the state, when they calculate the Chapter 70, every kid is charged as one kid when they recalculate on the October 1 census. But when they calculate it for kindergarten, they count that child as half a child because there's no requirement to be in full day when you're in kindergarten. So it's more formula-based with the Department of Ed versus, what the town actually pays.
But on our budget side...
Do you see no impact on your budget side? There'll be nothing.
Yeah, because we'll continue to pay for the half day,
right.
but not the
right,
the
not the
second
full
half
day.
of the day.
It'll all be tuition-based. It will cover all that.
Yeah.
And plus, just education is so important. I mean, every statistic, every study you've seen.
It's so important. Very, very important. So we're excited about it. I think the parents are excited about it, and we're looking forward to implementing in September.
Good. Excellent.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No,
Mark.
no, go ahead.
Do you have enough classrooms at Memorial?
We
to
do.
it? Good,
We have enough for 5 classrooms a full day,
excellent.
which would be 100 students.
Jeff, one of the things that makes it difficult in determining the cost per student is special ed.
That's correct.
About what percentage of the total school budget is special ed?
Let me think. I think last year it was 5.7 million spent on special education.
So it's about 20%.
20%.
20%, which is an enormous amount that people don't realize.
And the population is below state average here. So our population of special education is around 13 to 14%. And the state average is 17 to 18.
Wow.
So even with a lower population, I think they do a really good job here in special education. But it's expensive, and you don't know. That could change tomorrow. You know, we don't know.
Individual needs of the kids, obviously, and who comes into town.
Correct.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks. I
for
appreciate
coming
you
in.
taking the time. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Jim. All righty. We ready? Bylaw review. Russ, I guess? Yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members. Our committee was formed to review the charter and the town bylaw. The town charter provides that this process is to be done every 5 years, when in fact it hasn't been done in anybody's memory that it has been done. So it's been the first time in a long time. Now, while the initial intent was to see if any changes of substance were warranted, it was soon determined that the first phase of this project should be the codification of all our town laws into one central document in electronic form to be accessed by the town officials and the general public. The codification process included reorganizing, renumbering, rearranging, updating language to be consistent with and in compliance with state statutes and regulations, and even to be consistent within the original documents themselves and with existing situations in our town government. So we decided we also decided to include the zoning bylaw as part of this code and reach out to other town departments to see if their rules and regulations should also be included. The result after all this is the town code, which consists of the town charter, the town bylaw, and the zoning bylaw. We decided to include as appendix items such town boards and department rules and regulations that would be helpful for informational purposes and to serve as a central repository. These will remain separate from the town code per se, allowing each department or board to make their own changes without need to go to town meeting for approval. Examples of items to be included in the appendix are Planning Board subdivision rules and regs, Board of Health regulations, sewer use bylaw and forms, Water Department, Housing Partnership Committee guidelines, School Department policy, Conservation Commission rules, regs, and forms, Board of Selectmen earth removal regulations, Police Department guidelines. Again, these are to be included without any review or suggested changes by our committee, and each department or board will continue to have authority to manage and maintain their own documents. The changes being made to the town charter, town bylaw, and zoning bylaw at this time are generally housekeeping in nature. None are what you or I would consider to be substantive in nature. We decided it would be better to present to this year's town meeting a product that was not controversial in nature. It would provide a cleaner starting base for working on a substantive review next year. We decided the second phase of the project would be considering such substantive changes to be presented to next year's town meeting. Now, we'll be meeting with town council to finalize the version and warrant article language. Right now, we're asking for 2 warrant articles. The first article being for the basic codification process, the reorganizing, putting it in a good format. The second article, if it's determined after meeting with town council that there are certain changes that we'd like to have in there, that they're substantive enough in the eyes of the Attorney General's office to require specific review, then we'd like the second article to be in a format somewhat like you'd use for your school budget, where it would list all of the items individually as what is considered to be a substantive item. And then at the town meeting, read through them and put a hold on any particular one item that might be of interest to anybody. And if it goes through the whole evening and nobody puts a hold on it, then all those substantives would be approved. So we're asking for those two form of warrant articles. As an aside, though, we're not recommending any truly substantive changes at this time. We have identified a number of items that we consider for Phase 2 type review for next year. So we suggest that our warrant article be a general explanation of the resulting product, with red line copies available for public inspection at the townhouse and the public library.
Okay.
And that's our report.
Would you want to put those online too, Russ?
They can be, and sure, I don't have a problem with that.
So we could do that, put it on the town's website.
I believe that was the plan.
Yeah, okay, good.
We can have a separate header up there as,
Yeah.
the bylaw, yeah.
Excellent.
I'll add that to the list.
Sounds great.
Russ, we had some discussion at the last meeting of the whole thing with the state hospital, of what bylaws, and I know one of the meetings I went to, correct me if I'm wrong, but your board was feeling that you have so much to do to add this additional set of bylaws of how that's going to apply with the state hospital was just too much, that you were more looking for a separate committee. Am I correct in interpreting that?
What we decided after getting into the meat of the project was that it seemed like the best idea was to do the codification first, and that was our primary goal, which did take a lot of person hours between us, General Code, it's the vendor and all. We also decided that it'd be better, like I said, to put this in a nice reorganized fashion. It'd be easier to get that passed, and then to go through substantive type changes. Now, the substantive type changes are individual little line items here and there, and also major additions to the bylaws or the town charter or the town whatever, in lieu of the state hospital or other type of projects in town. And I think the way we put it to you at that point is we would be happy to continue to be involved with that, but that we would suggest that any individuals who have a particular interest in any particular issue, that they be invited to participate. So if there was, say, a noise we're talking about doing a noise bylaw, which if it is for the general town. If anybody's interested in that issue, we would invite them. We would ask you to invite them to the committee to work on that, because yes, it turns out to be quite extensive type reworking things or creating things. We had gotten a number of bylaws from other surrounding towns, and we looked at one. I think it was Lincoln. And it was literally that thick. So there are a number of towns that have already addressed those issues, which we can borrow from and plagiarize from. Franklin, I believe, has a good noise, a particular noise bylaw. So there are towns that we can, use them, not have to reinvent the wheel, but it's still
What I'm wondering
project into itself.
Is it something you think you can handle as far as what additional bylaws will need to apply to the state hospital? I know Christine had mentioned maybe it was something the town could do internally that Mark could play a major role.
Oh, sure. You could set up an individual committee or group to work on any individual item, sure. We wouldn't be offended.
Can we just get back to Mark? Do you see that as something that maybe would be the best course? Because I know Bill Massaro has numerous times has real concerns about whatever ends up there. Are we going to have the bylaws to handle whatever?
And I think it's a sound exercise to go down checklists and look at what other towns have and decide, is that something you want in that form or modified, whatever. I think it can be handled with the committee and staff, or however you want to do it. But yeah, the short answer is yes. A lot of the state hospital, if you're going to cull that out, is going to be land use type stuff, and until, it's kind of the tail wagging the dog. Pete alluded to a master plan a minute ago. You're really supposed to have a master plan in place, and then the zoning follows the master plan. So the exercise of determining what use or uses are in various parts of the town should already have been done before you get into specific projects. And in fact, there's been legislation pending at the state level now that keeps getting refiled that is major land use reform, but would require towns to have a master plan and to have their zoning consistent with the master plan. So that is an exercise that should be started sooner rather than later. That also is something that can be done in-house with a committee, perhaps with the use of consultants as needed.
So is that, I'm just trying to get, is that something you think we can do in-house, and then you would get back with Russ and his committee, or how would that be set up?
I really think what would be appropriate at this point would be to have you folks host a workshop that we can get town boards and committees and staff and all together and get all these issues out on the table, prioritize them, and then come up with a game plan as to how to proceed.
Mr. Chairman, I notice we have a couple of other members of the committee here, Alyssa Franco and Cynthia Green. I don't know if they have any thoughts on this, too, that they might want to offer.
I guess one of the benefits of codifying this is that you can then ask all of the town boards to go in and search by word. As it is now, someone would have to read through everything, and it's very tedious. So I think the idea of having a meeting with all of the committees after they have done that kind of search to figure out what changes are needed would be great.
Good, okay, yeah.
Is that codification available to be circulated now?
Not
No.
quite. Almost. Right, Russ?
Yeah. Very
And I
well.
think the
Well-
hospital, it's going to require zoning changes, but I think we need to have an idea of where we're going with it and what kind of projects we're going to do up there before we implement a lot of
Zoning changes. Makes
So
sense, yeah.
this was a bigger project than we anticipated. We thought we would do more in the past 18 months, but it ended up being a rather large project just to go through it
Get it
and
all.
to get everything consistent, renumber, read through the typos and the bad grammar and things like that. So, we'll be starting with a baseline here.
Right, right.
And that's what's important, that we'll have something to work from.
And as Alyssa was saying that, it occurred to me that it makes a huge difference whether we buy the land up there or not. If we buy the land, then it's under our control, and we've got the luxury of time to plan out what we want and perhaps get into some fairly specific actual permissible zoning uses, because presumably you might be talking about putting on our own land disposition process and specifying what it is you want, as opposed to zoning or regulating in reaction to the fact that we don't own it, but the state's about to flip it out to private developers, and you want to, under that scenario, hold off until you know or put into place things that are more controlling than they might otherwise be if we control it.
Right. Well, I'm getting a sense, and I think it's true, that it's a small town. We have finite resources of folks that have been willing to volunteer time, because it's the same people that are on all these different committees. And I know you all serve and do different, obviously you're on different boards and stuff like that, so I understand we can only do so much. So I think that's one of the things we're running into trouble here. We can say, we're going to form another committee to do this, but there's no one left.
That being said, and I don't disagree with you, but if you're going to talk about consultants,
Yeah.
They need to have direction, so you end up with interaction with consultants. You can't just say to consultants,
No,
go
I
do it and bring it back, because it's not going to reflect you.
No. Well, and I think maybe then we'll have to work maybe through the departments more and stuff like that. But I think once we see it and we've got a chance to really kind of see what we've got to work with, then we'll all have a better idea of what we need to do next. I think, yeah.
I'll also let you know that when we went to-
Where do we go for the next step as far as the hospital issues there with the bylaws? Do we call this workshop, or what do we do?
You have a choice. You can wait and see how this plays out with the special town meeting coming up and all, or you can, anticipate it and schedule something now. And I mean, certainly make myself available whatever time you decide to hold it, if it's a Saturday or whatever.
In fact, I think you had voted to ask town council to review the bylaws as far as the hospital is concerned and to take that on as a project. So that's probably something that you might want to take charge of and determine the best way to proceed on.
Well, again, we end up kind of spinning in a circle, because I'm aware, obviously, as Franklin Council, I know what's out there in terms of regulatory bylaws, what we have and what we don't have here. But again, it's not my decision. It's you. It's your town. Those are the decisions that have to be made. There's a legal framework, but you have to choose: are we going to regulate this? Are we not going to regulate this? How are we going to regulate this? What's our bylaw going to say? It's fine to take samples from other communities, but you don't just do a cut and paste. You've got to actually go through the analysis.
Well, I think
a lot of it ends up being
Go ahead,
false.
Christine. Yeah.
I think what the board is looking for is exactly what you just said, in a list of recommendations, because you have the experience in Franklin and Medway, is to give them, a list of things that they would like to see and changes they would like to make.
Maybe not even recommendations so much as just a list of things that we're not regulating that we could be, that other towns are regulating, and then we could go down and say whether we care to regulate swimming pools or hazardous waste moving through the town on the town public ways and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and let me just point out, because it was loosely alluded to, and I apologize if I've mentioned it before, Mr. Chair cut me off, but you've got town bylaws that are enacted by town meeting and form part of the code, actually are going to be the code. They alluded to the appendix and Board of Health regs.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Boards of health have as much, if not more, authority than the legislative body of a town. Chapter 111 of the general laws invests in boards of health an incredible amount of authority to have regulations addressing any public health, safety, welfare issue within their jurisdiction, which is huge. It's huge. And those bylaws, those regulations rather, the Board of Health enacts, are done much simpler. They promulgate them, they notice a public hearing, and they adopt them, and they're in effect like that. And they can be extremely comprehensive. And that is like a huge side to town regulatory authority that, to my knowledge, we minimally address at the present time, and only the Board of Health could do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something to be aware of as well.
All right. Well, then I guess maybe we'll have to figure out how to have some type of a brainstorm session or something like that outside of our meetings here, where we can maybe kind of just hammer things out with Mark and stuff at some point.
Well, maybe some sort of a list that Mark could prepare to give that as a starting point so that you could take.
Next couple of months or something like that. Once everything's all set and we've got a product to look at. Kind of.
And then maybe,
Start looking at
yeah.
and then maybe after a town meeting, when things are a little quieter in town government, we could have a as you suggested, some sort of
Yeah.
So we gotta
No, I think
think
it's-
workshop or something.
Usually we just say, wow, that's behind us, and everybody goes into,
Right.
vacation mode. I think maybe this year we need to be prepared to roll up our sleeves and
That'd be
back
good.
to
Yeah.
attack the next thing,
No.
which is this.
Good. No, I think that's good.
So I'd also like to add, though, at the end, that as a result of this process and our interaction with the various boards and departments in town, we got a lot of positive feedback from all of them they were so happy that this is kind of finally being done, that the final product that ends up here after not only the codification process, but the review and the changes to be made, they think it's going to be a huge benefit going forward, and from their perspective as well. So, I mean, they were really tickled pink that these were happening. It was a little bit of work for some of them to get us the information, but, you know, again, like I said, it's going to be a repository going forward.
Russ, did you find that there was a lot of duplication in our bylaws, or that, you know, one board is regulating the same thing that another board's regulating? Was there much of that? I think of the stormwater management as one area where it seems to be you got the planning board, the Board of Health, the Public Works Department,
And even
Conservation Commission.
The police chief has been complaining about having to do drain.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So, yeah, there is some of that, which some of the stuff is kind of antiquated. Like I said, these things haven't been reviewed in many years, and some of them probably go back to, you know, when 1950 or something, or earlier, you know, when things were constables. That's another thing.
Yeah.
The use of constables in town and the reference to them throughout these bylaws. And Chief says, we don't use them. And it's,
Russ, when you're regulating horse carriages in the street, I think you go back a little further than 1950.
yeah. So I was going to say, you know, when the town was chartered. So.
Excellent. Good. Well, thanks very much thanks for coming in.
Thanks.
Thanks for all the work. Really appreciate it.
Can Russ, can I just ask if you did get the bylaws from everybody, including, I know that the police were having trouble finding theirs at one point. Did they finally come up with
Yeah, we
something?
ended up pretty much getting anything that we probably needed, and we kind of laid back. But we did. We got a good stack of things, at least for the start.
Good.
I mean, going forward, again, the appendix can be increased, you know, once, yeah.
And just so that I understand, there are going to be two articles on the town meeting warrant. One is for the codification, and the other is for, you're going to actually have a list of substantive changes as well?
Yeah, and Mark has counseled us that, I mean, even a change that we don't consider, you and I wouldn't consider to be substantive,
Yeah.
like, there's a reference of the superintendent of streets. Well, we don't really have one, so we were going to change it to superintendent of highway. And Mark is suggesting that that's something that's substantive enough to be required to be listed out. So this list will be what we're going to call substantive, but they're really vanilla.
Okay, all right.
The point is, we made the commitment to codification to ensure that that article doesn't meet with any obstacles from the Attorney General, so we do
Right.
it as cleanly, as purely, and how it's been done in other communities, which is that you represent to the AG and the public that you're doing absolutely nothing but reorganizing, adding captions and numbering, and that's it.
Mhm. You're not
Nothing else
sneaking
is there,
anything
no
in.
matter
Yeah,
how
yeah.
slight, that's that warrant article. And if they have another one, they want to change titles, they want to change positions, they want to correct spelling or whatever, even if they may only be considered by us to housekeeping, quote unquote, that's in a separate warrant article, and if it gets flagged at all, we still get the codification approved.
Is what you mean, yep.
Mark, I have two articles for changes to the bylaws, one for codification, one for the change that was proposed by you and the moderator
All right, so this will
about
be a
speak.
third one then.
Will this be a third, or could the change proposed by you and the moderator be incorporated into the,
I'd have to
substantive
wait and
changes.
talk with Russ to see what it is that they've got.
okay. Well, I assume that you and Russ, or you and the committee, or whatever, will draw up those articles, because I wouldn't really know what to put in them.
Right.
Okay.
And then,
You need to give me the starting point is to have a list of every single one of them, and then when you're ready with that, get it to me and we can get together.
and then my last question, Russ, had to do with going forward after the town meeting. Because you guys were originally 8, and it looks to me like you're either 5 or 6 at this point. Are the 5 or 6 of you that are still on the committee, are you interested in going forward and doing the next step of looking at the changes, or?
Yeah, we are. We've talked about it, and we like the number 5. Scott was involved for a long time, and then he got really busy, so that's why I put him in parentheses on our list here. He's pretty much off of doing the work, but
Yep.
the 5 of us work very well together, And I think we're comfortable enough to continue on the second phase.
And you don't need any more bodies? You're
And
good
we
with the
wouldn't-
way you are?
Not as far as the encompass of the project that we're doing now. Something like a new noise bylaw or a Hospital Hill type bylaw, we would
Okay.
suggest have be somebody else. But
That's what we need, is a sledding bylaw. It's incredibly dangerous up there. It worries me about the town owning the sledding hill,
Well, it's a recreational use, so as long as you're not charging their fee.
as long as you don't control it. As long as you don't try to make it
Thanks, Russ.
safer.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your committee and what they've done. This is, I know it's a lot of work.
Cynthia, thank you.
And they've been here many late nights.
Well, and it's very, I mean, it's very detailed work, too. I mean, I watched you guys at your meeting, and it was clear that it was very laborious.
That's good, because it's hard to get more than that to meet at one time.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Thank you for what you guys have done.
Okay, next things on our action items, we'll tackle our first action item for this evening, which is to talk about, I think we'll plow through the warrant articles. All righty.
That's a good term to use for this list.
It's going to be a new record for
Yeah.
articles.
We will probably need to either add one or, unless they combine two, but I'll add that into the list till I decide how to
Okay,
handle it.
that's fine.
Do you want me to start running through them? And
Yeah.
I think the first first 10
Yeah,
are
just the
routine.
normal stuff, yeah.
So we'll start with 11,
Yeah.
13, and 14. Those are the three that, 12 is 13 is the one you vote every year. That's a
Right.
routine one. But 11, 12, and 14 are the three that pertain to veterans.
Yep.
It was submitted by the Veteran Services Officer and the Board of Assessors. One of them would reduce the residency requirement for qualified veterans from 5 to 1. We don't have to review the substance of these articles, just so that you know what they are and that you put them on. Yes. Okay, 15 and 16 are routine. They're the salary of elected officials, classification and play plan changes.
Yeah.
17 and 18, operating budget and capital budgets. Those are routine. Article 19 was one suggested by Selectman Peterson, amend the town of Medfield bylaws to regulate public consumption of marijuana. He submitted an article, a bylaw that had been adopted by Needham. I believe we also have one there that was adopted by Boston. Milford, I think it was Boston one too. So you can take a look and decide which one is most appropriate for Medfield if you decide you want to put that on. What is your pleasure?
Yeah, I think, because we talked about that
Do you
initially
wanna-
before, because you had given us some draft regulations.
It was, well, the one that I had was the Needham one.
Needham one, yeah.
You're asking us to make a decision right now, Mike?
Well, we can either make a decision one by one, or go through the whole list and then go back and make a decision, however you prefer. But
As to
the
which
warrant
one
closes at the end of the meeting tonight, so you need to make decisions on what you're going to include in the warrant.
I mean, I can't make a decision about this one because I don't have the different languages that you're talking to me about.
Well, you don't have to have the decision on the specific wording. It's a decision whether you want to put it on the warrant or not.
So we'll keep it on the, yeah.
Yeah, I would keep
Can
it.
its general wording, number 19, does that suffice?
Yes, yeah.
So he doesn't actually have to have.
We'll draw up article and get out the samples to you, yeah.
My advice is consistent with every other bylaw we have in town. It ought to be simple. The Milford one is simple and comprehensive. It prohibits marijuana and the active derivative of marijuana, any kind of ingestion of it. in
Good.
public, either on public property or in public, and it's simply a fining, because that's all you can do is impose a penalty up to $300.
I think the difficulty with this one is going to be enforcement, because the enforcement agency is the courts, and the courts don't seem to have the time or the wherewithal to really enforce these things. So
Yeah.
the other thing I think is if the voters vote to adopt recreational use of marijuana, it'll be even more difficult, because it will be, sort of like smoking. So.
Yeah.
Well, or alcohol, yeah. I mean, alcohol is legal, and yet we have a public
Prohibited
consumption of
public-
alcohol
yeah.
prohibition, so.
Yeah. Again, if the courts will enforce it, it would be wonderful, but that's, okay, so why don't we get the samples out of what we have? You can take a look at them and decide which version or combination thereof you want to go with. Article 20 is a routine one that we do every year, and Article 21 is a routine one, except the warrant committee chairman last year, and I believe at the beginning of this year, indicated that he would like to start putting $500,000 a year into this fund. Last year we put $375,000. So
It's just a
it would
question of
be,
the numbers.
it's a question of working out the numbers, and I'll try to come up with some way to do that. I think our free cash balance was very good this year, so we might be able to swing that.
Excellent.
I know, Pete, you'd like to put the $1.3 million, so we'd really get on track to it, but I think.
Well, I think, I thought it was you say that we're incurring $2 million a year.
$1.8 million, yeah, $1.8 million, $1.9 million, yeah. But I just don't think it's feasible, and very few communities are fully funding this. I think Wellesley did. There may be a couple of others that have done it, but it's very difficult.
The governor came into the session that I was at the Mass Municipal Association annual meeting a couple of weeks ago on the state finances. And he asked Amy Pinter and Glenn Shore if he could break in and speak. And so he did speak to us. And it was actually very interesting in that he blamed the MMA for preventing the OPEB legislation that his committee had come up with from passing. And so, and as I walked away from the meeting, I bumped into Jeff Beckwith, and so I just wanted to make sure that Jeff, who's the executive director of the MMA, and I just wanted to make sure that Jeff was aware that the governor was there and what he was saying about the MMA. And then Jeff took me aside and explained to me that it was a commission of apparently 12 different groups, and the MMA was the only group that didn't vote in favor of the report. But Jeff explained that basically the savings under the governor's this proposal was absolutely minimal, apparently, for the first 10 years, in addition to which it took away local control from the individual cities and towns, so that you had to go in at a certain threshold support for the retiree pensions. And some of them, apparently, the towns don't provide for health insurance for their retirees at all. Right. Other ones don't provide for the spouses. And so that for those towns, it would have been a big
Some of the smaller towns, it was difficult. And the other feeling was that a lot of the action forward fronted the expenses but didn't fund them. Mm-hmm. You know, that there was a concession to the public employee groups to postpone action or implementation of it, and that's why the funding, the savings wouldn't take place for the first 10 or 20 years. They'd be waiting till everyone had retired.
Yeah, before
you must have gone to the pro session. I went to the anti-session because Jeff Beckwith rushed in and got to speak on the platform and say why MMA was against it.
He told me that he didn't want to get in a public debate with the governor in our session. So.
He didn't, but he found another room to get and make his point.
Well, he dumped it on me. Clearly, he was wanting to talk about it.
Yeah, you had your own private session with him.
I did.
Okay, well, in any event, that
come up with a number.
We'll come up with a number on that. Article 21 is a little bit 22. Excuse me. 22 is a little bit different. We have been putting the money. We have about $700,000 in the stabilization fund, OPEB stabilization fund. The auditors and the actuaries tell us that if it is in a stabilization fund, they cannot count it to reduce your unfunded liability because the town meeting by a 2/3 vote can vote money out of that stabilization fund for any other purpose. So they are saying unless you put it into a OPEB trust fund where it becomes inviolate, you cannot use it for any other purpose. We cannot credit that against your liabilities.
So this would create that fund, and we would then transfer the 700,000 into
To
it?
that fund, yeah.
Yes. The problem is, there are a couple of ways of doing it, and this is where we need to, we may end up having to pass this and then figure out which the best way to do it. You can put the treasurer in charge, and then she has to put all the money in PRIT, which is the Public Retiree Investment Trust, and they manage the investment of funds for it. So there's no fiduciary responsibility. Another way of doing it is to elect or appoint a board of trustees. So you would presumably try to get people in town who were experienced in investments or whatever, and get them to serve as trustees of this OPEB trust. They do have fiduciary responsibilities and are responsible for the investment of funds and can be held liable for it.
Yeah.
I believe you can get liability insurance for that, but I think that's something we'd have to look into before we got anyone to serve on a board of
Is this
trustees.
being done in other communities? Do they?
Yes. Most of the ones that have done it so far have done it with special legislation. But the legislature passed this bill a couple of years ago because they're trying to encourage communities to start funding it.
Sure.
Under the new accounting rules, we have to record each year on a 20-year schedule, I think, or 25-year schedule, a portion of the unfunded liabilities. We have to add them to our financial statements.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually what's going to happen in most cities and towns, your liabilities will exceed your assets, and in effect, you will have a negative net worth.
Yeah.
We are in a pretty good position right now, in part because we are sitting on about $11 million of school building assistance money that we have in the bank, so that helps us out. And in part because of several of the new buildings we've constructed have a value. But eventually it will catch up with us. When we met with the, what's the term, actuaries, they said there are some school districts that already have a negative net worth on their financial statements because they have no assets to offset it.
Do most of the other towns elect the boards, or do they have the treasurer? Do you know?
There aren't a lot of towns that have actually gone so far as to put it in, particularly as Mike
In the
indicates,
trust, yeah.
the ones who've taken steps are the ones that have passed special legislation. Then the state came along and enacted this Section 20 as general legislation. Unfortunately, Department of Revenue has some issues with the way the legislation itself is drafted, and it's very difficult when you go to apply it as to how you set things up. We've been wrestling in Franklin where we had special legislation passed, and then the general legislation passed, and the TA over there is still trying to figure out whether to proceed under the special legislation or the general legislation.
Yeah.
And the mechanisms to set up these various trusts, there's all kinds of models floating around. And then, as Mike indicates, who's actually going to manage the funds once you set it up.
Yeah.
Who makes that decision? Whether it's the board or the treasurer, is the board of the selectmen? Who makes that decision?
So I would think here it's going to be
Yeah.
either or a combination of Selectman and Mike.
Seems to me it makes sense to kind of lean towards Georgia having the.
I think initially until because PRIT has had a pretty good track record of investment performance. Although some people say you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket if they're not handling our pension funds. We do it through Norfolk County, but if you have your pension funds and your OPEB funds invested in the same area,
Yeah.
and something happens,
Yeah.
you've lost it twice. It's like putting your retirement funds in your own company stock, and then the company goes bankrupt. You lose twice. So we've got to do some work on that to try to figure out what the best way is. And it may be that we don't even do it this year. If it gets so complicated that we can't figure it out, we may just suggest tabling that. But we need to do it at some point because we need to start getting credit on our financial statements because it affects your bond rating.
Yep.
Bonding companies are starting to look at this now when they evaluate your financial stability. Okay, well, enough on that for now.
Yeah.
Article 23, Conservation Commission had originally submitted 2 separate articles, and when I showed them to town council, he said they don't need 2. You can combine them in 1. This is to authorize them to lease Homequist land
Yep.
for agriculture or other conservation. Is this because only the Board of Selectmen can lease land, is that, or do they need town meeting permission to lease land?
Well, it's because conservation commissions don't have authority by themselves to lease land, is the
Okay.
bottom line.
So they need to get it from town meeting?
From town meeting.
And they're looking for, what was it, 20 years?
I haven't actually spoken with the agent or the board to know what it is they have in mind. I do know we had these articles on, and I think passed several years ago. We had a farmer lined up.
Yeah, I think they did talk about 20 years because they said the farmers don't want to make the investment in the land to get it up to shape unless they have a long-term lease. So that they could report on that. Okay, Article 24. That's one of the biggies. That's the public safety building.
Yep.
They are not the Permanent Building Committee is not going to look for the bond issue at this town meeting.
Right.
They have decided to request funds to complete the design and bid through the bidding phase.
Yep.
And then they would anticipate coming back to town meeting either in the fall or perhaps January or February
Yep.
when they have bid prices and ask for the bond issue. They asked me to come up with some ways to get the funds because they need about $850,000. In addition to the $500,000 was appropriated at the last town meeting. So I've been taking a look at that, and I think I've come up with a way to do it because our free cash balance is healthy this year. It'd be taking roughly $500,000 out of free cash and $350,000 out of stabilization fund. And so then they could come back with a much more accurate price figure for the bonding authorization,
Right.
which would require an override.
Yeah.
So-
Well, that's how it worked with the garage. It worked very nicely because then you had a real number for the,
Yep.
for the garage would be close to the ratio.
Okay, Article 25 is also another biggie. That's for the water tower and water mains. I drafted an article and had Mark review it, and bond council reviewed it, and they've approved that. The Water and Sewer Board, right now, they have their consultant working on the design of the tower and cost estimates, but the thinking right now is the total project cost will be about $4.5 million.
Okay.
Bonded over 20 years. That also will not require an override because it will be paid for out of user fees from the Water Enterprise Fund.
Yep.
And I've given a schedule to Willis, so he's aware of the price and that. So.
Did you see my thoughts on this in terms of the sunk costs for hospital?
Use the mic.
Had made some
Just get the mic, Bill, that's all.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, it's up there, yeah. It's right on the front row there. We're finally going to get you up in the front row. Well, that took a lot. Oh, no.
I had made a suggestion about a possible rewording of the language. So I guess my first question would be, are you voting on the language tonight, or is
Yeah.
it still open for change? All right.
Just a concept.
All right.
Yeah.
I just would like to, I sent Christine a copy of it, considering the requirement for the mains, the requirement for any other superstructure or any other infrastructure up there in terms of the potential development of the hospital. And if it can be considered a sunk cost, it should be, perhaps some language should be added in the, because we will get 50 cents on the dollar back on any sunk costs that are associated with future redevelopment of the hospital. I just asked to take a look at it later, that's all.
Okay. How would that be a sunk cost? You're doing it for the...
It depends why you're doing it.
Yeah.
If there is any possibility that the existing mains would suffice but would not handle the capacity of a redevelopment, then you could argue that it was in fact a sunk cost to looking towards meeting the capacity requirements up at the redevelopment at the hospital. It's just something to look at, that's all, rather than shut the door on something.
Yep. Gotcha. Okay, Article 26. You'll recall at the October town meeting, the Water and Sewer Board borrowed $139,207 from stabilization fund. This is to put it back in stabilization fund. Article 27 is, in the past, Ken has put money in the water and sewer budget for either infiltration inflow study or repairs to the water lines or purchase of water meters. Under Willis's new system, which I think you're all familiar with, he would prefer to have it, it works better with his system if you put it in a separate article.
Sure.
So they want to put this article in every year to appropriate money. Again, this comes out of Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund. So this year, because you have the water tower on Article 25, they will only be requesting funds for sewer work. They won't be requesting anything for water. So I needed to change that. I need to knock out water.
Yep.
And just leave it Sewer Enterprise Fund. Thought I had done that, but
You did, yeah, it's here. Sewer enterprise. It just says sewer, I think, on 27. Yep.
okay. Article 28 and 29. Those are the articles you referred to earlier about Lot 3 at Ice House Road, and we have to include those because one was from a town board and one was from a citizen petition, so they will both appear on the warrant.
It's just going to be incredibly confusing with this.
It's like last year.
Article 30 is the Cultural Council that I think Gene's here and Bill are here to talk to you about. Article 31 and 32 are what you just spoke to about Russ, and there might possibly be a third one. Or
Okay.
We've already agreed among ourselves, the moderator, Mike, and myself, to change language in the bylaw. Right now, the town meeting bylaw limits the number of speakers in town meeting has a right to 1 for and 1 against, and 2 minutes each, unless the town meeting votes. And so therefore, every time the moderator, when he does his housekeeping at the beginning of the meeting, has to remember to get that vote in place so that we can have a legitimate discussion when as needed. So we're advising taking the language out and leaving it in the discretion of the moderator.
Okay.
I think you'd have a riot on your hands if you only allowed one speaker per article anyway.
2 minutes, that's it. Be really quick. Tell me.
Okay, Article 33 and Article 34 are articles that were submitted, being submitted by the Medfield Energy Committee, and they are to try to achieve compliance with the Green Communities Act. One would be to establish by right zoning for, in this case, solar photovoltaic generation.
Actually, it's going to be an overlay district with the IE district included.
I thought they had changed that when I read Sarah's. That's the way I originally had it, but it does.
That is the way it is. As far as I know, it's an overlay district, and it's defined as the IE included.
Okay, well, you got to write the article anyway, so we'll leave it up to you to write it correctly, and I'll change the wording on this accordingly. I had it that way, but I thought when I read it, I didn't read it. It was an overlay, but it may be. Okay, Article 34 is
The stretch code.
is the stretch code, and that seems to be the controversial one every time. But Article 35 has been routine for about 5 or 6 years now to appropriate money for consulting services in connection with the state hospital. You just have to decide on an amount of money. I think you've been putting $75,000 a year in, although last year I think you went back to the well for another $50,000. So you probably need some advice from the hospital advisory committees as to how much money they think is appropriate. So
someone give us a number. Yeah, that'd be good.
It's going to be heavy down to C&D area this coming summer and probably into the early part of next year as we witness the actual cleanup and restoration.
It is an overlay district.
Okay, I thought they were pretty well done up there, aren't they? Aren't they going to finish up this year? So will this be the last year for the cleanup part?
They'll probably drag over into January, February, March at the latest, depending on what happens with the weather in the fall and everything else.
Okay.
The majority of the work will be done this summer, but Andrea Stiller will probably be down there.
A lot, yeah.
So.
Okay. By the way, I'm only asking if you want to put in the articles that you would be sponsoring. If another board is sponsoring it, it automatically goes in. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Article 36 is appropriate funds for construction of a pocket park and/or name the park. I'm not quite sure whether you want to leave that up to town meeting, or whether that's going to be done by a survey, but I put it in there because that was part of your suggestion. So, but
That could be a long discussion at town meeting if we have to name the park there.
right, and you never know what they'll come up with.
Right.
They might come up with something totally unexpected. The committee has to work on an amount of money. They still have to figure out what they're going to ask for from the town, what they might be able to do by private fundraising, whatever. Article 37 is the right-of-way between Wild Holly and Elaine and Holmquist Conservation Land. Mr. Biscotti was in talking to Leslie today about it, so we'll see.
Good.
Excellent.
And I think we had some suggestions on the best way to do that.
Yeah, I haven't heard from him recently. I don't know if you got Pete.
No, I haven't, no.
No, Pete.
Pete
was
Pete,
in the
yeah.
loop on it, too.
Well, we were going to
Yeah,
meet
there
down
was-
there at one point. He
there was
wanted
a-
to meet us down there, but the weather hasn't been too disposed for that, so we probably need to wait till the snow's off the ground anyway, so we can see what conditions we're dealing with.
Yeah, because Sarah was trying to set up a meeting, and Bobby Kennedy Jr. had to deal with snow plowing instead.
Yeah.
I know the last time,
Yes.
that was the last time I saw anything about it.
So I'll check with her on that. Okay, Article 38. This is something the library director asked to insert. The State Board of Library Commissioners is having a program, and I said, "You're going to add on to the library?" She said, "Well, it's more to reorganize the library than to. It probably won't involve any construction." Although she mentioned something about the state hospital, if there was going to be anything done up there as part of
Something like an
the
annex or
chapel or something, some sort of, yeah. But, I think that's probably too far away for this type program. It's immediate. And she wasn't sure the library trustees would vote to apply for the grant. She was writing the grant and wanted to get something in before the warrant closed in case they went ahead. It would require a $25,000 match. I think it's something like 50% can be a cash match and 50% in-kind services or something like that. But if they decide to go forward with it, they can explain that. Yeah.
Explain it to us, yeah.
Okay. Article 39 is the Community Preservation Act, which you had discussed, and that you will need to because you'd be sponsoring that. If you want to put it on.
I'm a strong supporter of that. I just have some real concerns on the timing of that. And I know Chris Potts has, I don't know if you want to speak on that at all, but I don't know how the other selectmen feel, but, and again, I think it's something Medfield should have. I'm just real concerned with all that's on here is the timing.
I think there's.
The mic, we should get it.
Is it on?
It doesn't work in the room.
Okay.
It's for the home.
Okay. Yeah, I think there are two major reasons why it may be a good idea to postpone having this on the warrant. With the garage, the safety building coming up in the fall, and then more importantly, the state hospital vote coming up in March, that the timing just isn't really going to be that great. I was on a phone call today with Stuart Saganor from the Community Preservation Coalition, who just said, that based on his experience working with over 155 towns across Massachusetts, that it's going to doom the CPA if we have it on the warrant for April, and that he really feels that pushing it out to next year would really be a smarter thing for us to do. Dan Bible also, who had led the initial effort to get this passed, said that the reason that it didn't pass the first time was the lack of education around it, and that to try and push this through between now and April is just going to be too difficult given the amount of information that we have to put out there to educate people about what the CPA is. So I just put it out there to see about possibly taking it off for the April meeting.
I mean, I can just tell you from my experience in Medway, where it's probably the one really positive thing the town did, which was to vote it when it became available. But every time things get tough, that's what people start grousing about, is the added tax from CPA, even though it's really peanuts on your tax rate. So takes a very concerted educational effort.
And do people like what the CPA funds have been spent on in Medway or not?
It's hard to say because there's a vocal, very small minority, and everybody else.
That doesn't like anything, huh?
But I mean, we've had some major land acquisitions. That's the difference between Medfield and Medway. Medway had virtually no protected land before CPA came in. So that's been all the acquisitions, and
Yeah.
so we've acquired some big recreation parcels that have been
Yeah.
positive.
Well, I mean, this came up, I think, 6 years ago. If that had passed and Medfield had become one of the CPA towns, the Red Gate Farm, the hospital land that's coming up, Medfield would be saving astronomical sums of money that now we're going to have to spend ourselves, and we have spent over the past 6 or 7 years. But I just agree with Chris that there's just so much on the plate right now that this is not the best time this year to do that. So I would not be in favor of, even though I'm in favor of the program, I would not be in favor of having the article appear at this time on the warrant.
Yeah, and I have to agree too, just, we've got, I just feel we've got too much stuff on the plate we're trying to get done right now, and I don't know if it would pass anyways. I think with everyone thinking we got a lot of big things we're trying to tackle between the public
I think we
works.
really
I
need
mean,
to
the
educate and
public
let
safety.
people know what it is,
Well, yeah,
and we
yeah.
haven't done that.
Yeah, and things always take time in town to do that. It isn't something can be done pretty quickly.
It's an odd thing because the Community Preservation Act is a tax on ourselves that saves us money. And people don't get past the fact that it's a tax.
Yeah.
And they think of it as an extra cost, but the reality is that it'll save us money in the long run. So, but yeah, I'm happy to postpone it for a year if people think that it'll have a better chance of passing in a year's time.
Good.
Okay. Article 40 is to accept a parcel of land on Pine Street between the existing street and the layout. I think the easiest way to do this is to show you where the piece of land is. I think it will be an easy decision once you see it. This is Pine Street. I believe it's in the vicinity of 100 Pine Street. See where that
Yes,
bubble
yeah,
there?
we put that right there, yeah.
There's a little strip of land right
Yeah,
in the middle of
the
it.
street.
What? How did that come about?
Well, I think that's where the bad curves are on Pine Street, and when they did the layout,
They
the
straightened
layout
it.
was designed to eliminate those curves if they ever built the road.
So we went on both sides of this land?
Well, so they went,
This is
they
probably where the
took,
street still is.
Original street, and this is probably the rebuilt street. They took the curve.
I'm guessing it's the other way, that this is the layout and this is still the street.
yeah, I'm not sure which from looking at that, you can't really tell, but I think they were trying to eliminate the bad curve.
Sure.
So when they did the layout, it was off where the road was, and so you ended up with that little piece of land that is in between them, and it's a pain in the neck for the assessors because they have to send a tax bill out every year for like $10 or something. And
Good. So I think that's a pretty easy decision, huh?
Well, it would
We
make
wanna
sense
take that?
to
No,
have
we're not gonna
all
take
part
it.
of the layout, not
Yeah.
that little island in the middle.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, so I think that'd be terrific. Clean that up.
Those are the new assessors maps that came out this week, by the way, if you have any interest in taking a look at them. I think it was, or we got them this week, I don't know when they came out. Okay, where are we now? We're almost through this. 41. Okay, this is a technicality with the survey plan for the Scribner land up on Harding Street, or the Amnot land. Apparently, well, Mark can explain it better than I can, but they need to file a corrective deed. The county engineers have asked if we do this for them.
Okay.
There's a stone wall that's one of the boundaries of the property, and there was an error committed in the course of the field work, whether it was a mathematical or the fact that the drill hole in the rock was not in the right place. I'm not exactly sure, but it's resulted in a variance. So I think a butters engineer brought it to the attention of the county engineers. The county engineers have prepared a corrective plan. However, when we acquired this property from the Amnot some years ago, reference was made to to the plan, which is on record. So you can't just file the corrective plan. We've got, in fact, I've given this more thought since I gave Mike this as a place saver. We're probably going to need authority for you to accept a deed or a confirmatory taking of the parcel in order to ensure that our title references the corrected plan and not the original plan.
Okay. Can work that out.
The bottom line is the amount of property involved is negligible.
Mhm.
And it's also the back part, as I understand it, abuts the state hospital. It's open space. Nothing's ever going to really happen anyway.
Yeah, this came about because somebody is proposing a 4-lot subdivision on Hospital Road, and when they surveyed it, the surveying lines didn't match up, and so sometimes you look at these old deeds and they'll refer to a stone wall, and the stone wall isn't there, or it's fallen down.
The old
tree is
when they're doing new work, as Pete could tell you, the engineering thing has to close.
Yeah.
So if you start at a point,
You gotta come back to it.
it's got to come back and match up at that point, and when it doesn't close, then you've got a problem.
Yeah.
Okay, 42, Article 42. So you want to, you go along with putting that in, because that will be a selectman sponsored one, okay? And the Pine Street one you'll go along with?
Yep.
That's, okay. Article 42, change the name medical marijuana treatment facility to medical marijuana dispensary. This apparently is the term that the State Department of Public Health uses.
Okay.
So in order to have our zoning bylaw agree with the state language, we have to change. When we voted it last year, we called it a medical marijuana treatment facility. When the State Board of Health developed their regulations, they called it a medical marijuana dispensary.
But there's two, there's like the distribution and then there's the dispensary. Is there not two different?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The dispensary is what is getting permitted by the Public Board of Health. They came out, the State Board of Health came out with the initial 20 permits.
Right.
Right next to my
You
office.
don't have to have your cultivation facility where your permitted facility is. So
So this is all just talking about the dispensary. It's not talking about the
Okay,
cultivation.
it's just the language for that. The
Yeah.
other, the distribution is already covered.
It's all covered.
Okay.
This is just to make
Okay.
it consistent
Okay.
with the.
Well, that raises a point, Mark. Should we add dispensary and/or cultivation center?
We need to talk with Sarah. This originated with her. I haven't been in the loop up until now as to where this came from.
Because I know before,
Okay.
when they were talking, the facility on West Street was going to be a dispensary, not a distribution center.
No, actually,
It was a
at one
growing
point,
facility.
Somebody was coming in, they were talking a cultivation facility. They was gonna
Cultivation, so there's
cultivate.
two different terms, right?
Cultivation,
Yeah, they split. It has to be the same owner, though, I understand, doesn't it?
yes.
And it has
You
to be in
have
the
have
same
a
county?
permit regardless of where that is in order to have a cultivation facility. Now, Franklin is going to have a
Cultivation.
grow-only, a cultivation facility.
Great, yeah.
The permit holder is in Brookline.
Yeah.
But he's already leased this huge warehouse over there, which he's gonna convert into a grow facility. We
Correct.
have another one that is still pending because they had up to 35 and they only went with the 30 permits. So there's still another 15 out there that, and that would be a total facility, both dispensing and
Oh,
cultivation.
all in one, yeah.
Now, my point, the first time around, just so you're aware, is that frankly, I think it's in your interest, if you're gonna have anything, to have a dispensing facility. Because if you don't, then there's a hardship permit that's available to anybody that has a prescription for medical marijuana. And one of the criteria for hardship is the inaccessibility of a local dispensary. That then allows them to grow themselves.
Sure.
And there is absolutely no local oversight about that. You don't even know about it, the state will not tell you who has it, where they are, anything, unless and until you suspect criminal activity, and at that point, they will acknowledge it yea or nay.
Does
So
local mean within the borders of the town, or is there certain miles between facilities?
It
don't
depends.
know.
Depends on whether they have a car or not, or whether it's public transportation. I
yeah.
mean, they take all those things into account,
In
probably.
fact,
Hardship.
If there was one in the neighboring town, does that cover?
Well, so the dispensaries, at least within your town, are required as part of the regs to actually have a livery service to bring it to people's homes.
Yeah.
So that it takes out the hardship almost completely.
Yeah.
So this new language will cover everything.
Again, we need to talk with Sarah about what her thinking
Well,
is
yeah.
on this.
Okay, Article 43, I'm not sure they're going to go ahead with this. Sarah asked me to put a hold on this. They were talking about some changes to the sign bylaws, some corrective changes, but she wasn't sure whether they were ready to proceed with it, so that might be eliminated. We'll have to find out from her whether they are ready to
Since
go
it
ahead.
closes at the end of our meeting, do we just put it in and then we can withdraw it later?
Yeah, they would withdraw.
Well, see, if they don't put it in, they're the sponsor
Yeah.
of this, in this case. So if they withdraw it, you just wouldn't put it in, yeah. 44 is, this one you'll need to make a decision on. It's to adopt the local option sales tax on meals that Pete suggested.
I thought of this as another way of trying to get relief for people on their property taxes, basically, similar to the Community Preservation Act, but maybe the same arguments against the Community Preservation Act would come in against this one as well, because you're taxing something different. The town needs a certain amount of money every year to run the town. If we could get part of the money from the meals tax, my thinking is that the meals tax is going out to eat is it's a discretionary thing, so that it does self-select in terms of people who have the ability to pay for the meals pay for it. And the big benefit is that people from out of town are paying for it. And so that I saw it as a way of getting property tax relief for the homeowners in town, just the way the Community Preservation Act would nibble away at the edges of the property tax and get us a little property tax relief. I think that my strategy would be to put together a whole series of these small little things as best as we can to try to keep the property taxes down as much as we can. But if as I say, the same arguments against putting the Community Preservation Act would apply to this one, I would think, this year.
Well, I don't know, what's the amount? Let's say you spend $50 on a meal.
It's like
What's the actual tax?
0.75% or something?
It's 0.75%, so on $50, 50 cents would be 1%.
75 cents, or?
So it'd be 3/4 of 50 cents would be $37.50.
So we're talking 37 cents on a $50 meal?
Yeah. 37.5.
Well, I think that we should at least, I agree with what Pete is saying. We have to begin to do something with all the expenses we have and begin to look at how we can begin to cut down on the tax rate. I would be willing to let at least the people at town meeting decide whether this is something they want to do or not. And we're talking 37 cents on a $50 meal. We're not, talking huge amounts of money.
Yeah, I think the state meals tax, I think, is 6.25%. So this would bring it to 7%. So.
Do we know, are there any communities surrounding Medfield that also have that?
Walpole, Millis, Franklin. Do you know whether Medway does it or not?
I think they do, but I'm not sure.
I think it's about half the cities and towns in the state
so-
do it. It's
yeah.
it's a substantial number that do it.
I mean, the original argument was, from the restaurateurs themselves, that you were penalizing them, but there's so many communities that have done it now that it probably doesn't matter anymore.
It's also a room tax as well, but I mean, we don't have any rooms unless the Clark Tavern is approved.
Well, I'd be willing to go and let the people decide at town meeting if they want to do that or not.
Yeah, I'm personally opposed to it because I just get tired of incrementally getting taxed to death. Fees this, the license fees go up, you renew your license, and it's $40, and so I'm just opposed to nickel and diming, but it's certainly good to let the people decide what they want to do at town meeting. Personally, I don't think it's worth all the effort for the small amount that we're going to get here. And then it's another tax that you don't get to deduct, So say so now we're swapping something that's non-deductible on your taxes, which at least is deductible for people on income taxes.
So does it go to Hollywood or not?
But that's fine. I mean, we'll leave it on, and we'll see what people have to say. That's fine.
Leave it on,
You never know
okay.
whether I don't never know whether to conclude that when I do calculate the tip on the total amount, including taxes, or before you get to the tax.
Tax, I know.
There was another article that was on this list. I had a call this afternoon from Mike Taylor that they were going to put a historic district on, and they've decided to postpone that. So.
Okay.
Oh, good.
That would not be on
I
there.
think we do need to carry 3 on the bylaws, so.
Okay, so that'll be, well, if we're dropping 1, so that will add 1, so we'll stay with 45, I guess.
Mike, can I just ask a question on, because it was on originally, and the article, I believe it was Article 30 of the 2013 annual town meeting for the Lord sign that was not being spent. And there was talk, if the sidewalk project goes through, to be able to use that. I believe the warrant committee feels they can do that in-house, but at some point, since that Article 30 was not used for that, that doesn't go on to a warrant. When do we transfer that money back to?
You can do it a couple of ways. Probably the easiest way is to use it and apply it to your capital budget. You know, they have different articles that they will use to offset the capital budget costs, so you would appropriate it to as one of the funding sources for your capital budget.
So
that would
we
take care
would
of it.
vote that the warrant committee would approve it.
Yeah, so the capital budget committee would do
Capital
it.
budget.
Yeah, they could
They'd
just-
recommend it to
yeah.
you as part of the
Yeah, they
part
can
of the
use it as a
funding.
credit.
For town meeting.
Yeah, it'd probably
Yeah.
be easier
I
that
think
way.
that's the easiest rather than
Then
put a
rather
separate
whole
article.
other
Yeah.
article.
That's great. That's great.
That would work out nicely.
All right, now I have 5,000 for my capital budget.
Yay.
No, it's to reduce what you've already got to spend, not to add 5,000 more. Right, Mark? Are you the rep? Who's the rep this year?
Mark is.
I am.
You are,
Yeah,
okay.
I love coming to that. We're going to have a meeting soon, right?
Yes, I
One.
just sent a whole list of
Did you?
dates today.
Oh, did you? Okay, I'll take a look and see.
You want to hear from the cultural
Yeah,
council?
did you folks want to chat with us at all about anything? No? No?
I'm curious about the, is it still in there?
Yes,
Okay.
Yes.
What?
It is,
30.
Article 30, about the matching,
Yeah.
matching funds, yeah.
yes.
So there is still some question, I guess, about whether or not the council as a municipal board can grant municipal funds to other nonprofits. And we're trying to get to the bottom of that.
Okay.
And so for now, I'd like to request that it remain there
Oh, sure.
until
Yeah,
we can
and then
reach some
figure it out.
consensus
Yeah,
with
that's
that.
fine. Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's not a problem. Yeah.
And then, could I also ask for clarification on the Pocket Park in terms of the naming piece of it, because we're getting close to that,
Yep.
and we did go through the survey
Yep.
process.
Yeah.
Over half of the respondents actually wrote in their suggestions, and many of them were repeat. So what we'd like to do is, the committee met yesterday, and we've shortlisted it to 2.
Okay.
But because the community hasn't seen one of them, we'd like to put both of them out there again.
Okay, and
We're all-
revote it.
Yeah, we're in conversations also with the Committee to Study Memorials, so
Mm.
we'd like to, with their support, go through one more round and then make a single recommendation.
Yeah.
It's unclear to me who makes the final decision, and that's what I'm looking for clarification on.
Usually what we've done is that the Committee to Study Memorials, which was set up to do that, would make that recommendation. So they would take the name, and then the committee would then recommend.
To whom, though? I think that's the question. That
Well-
you know, like for example, on a
Well,
subdivision
it's a town
street.
meeting.
Yeah, but on a subdivision street, planning board makes a decision.
Correct.
On Brooks, and the town meeting voted to name the Brooks. I think they
Right.
put an article naming the Brooks. So it probably would be best to let the town meeting decide it. How do we name the?
Well, all the honor squares, the Committee to Study Memorials has made the recommendation to town meeting.
And they went on the
Gone
ballot.
through town meeting, only
Okay.
because it just gives it that official
Okay.
backing by that the people of the town have the chance that this is something that these people, because of their deeds, that we so honor them that it's coming before a town meeting rather than just the board. So we've
Yeah.
done that for the past many years on the honor squares. I don't believe we've done a park.
So then,
How did Baxter?
Yeah, how did Baxter?
That was
You go way back.
that was the Baxter family estate, wasn't it?
Well, yes, that was given to the town, absolutely correct. And same, it was given to the town by the Baxter family with the stipulation that it be named after, it was this guy Willard Howard, who married into the Baxter family, that it be named after the Baxters. You're absolutely correct.
God, I get to tell the town historians back to history.
No, you're right.
So then, maybe then you folks would then come with a name, one name to town meeting, and
Recommend
they'll
it.
recommend your recommendation for what the name is, and we take a vote at town meeting.
So then we're actually looking for two different things. One is going to be a budget item and one is going to be the name recommendation.
Should that be two separate
That's
articles, or it doesn't matter? They can be included in the same article.
This is
Yeah.
simple enough, you can probably do it in one.
Okay, all right, that would be good. Yeah, just bring one name, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so we don't have.
Which we'll do with the Committee to Study Memorials.
That makes sense, yeah. So whatever you guys all recommend, I think
Thank
that
you.
would work out
You
well.
could just leave it as like a sum of money, a name, and then throw it out to the floor and town meeting.
No, we're not gonna do that.
Well, if the
All
taxpayers are going to appropriate the money, maybe they'll call it Taxpayer Park.
There was a proposal that it be called Founders.
Founders, okay. Yeah.
We could auction off the name and raise some money, get some property tax.
Well, there we
relief.
go.
Reserving that for the elements within the park.
As long as you don't call it Dunkin' Donuts Park, I don't think the neighbors would like it.
Well, Starbucks wouldn't like
Yeah,
it.
stop.
Yes, that's what I mean, yes, yeah.
So the most creative was Z-Bucks Park.
Z-Bucks,
Starbucks.
Also not in the final two.
I don't know, that's kind of catchy.
Yeah.
That's good. So
It'd be easy to find, it'd be last in the phone book.
we're done? We're done.
Yes,
We're with
done,
the art,
yes.
Thank God.
Unless there's something else you want to put in, so.
No, that's all right, I think we're good. All right. All right, so we already talked about the land on Pine Street, so we all covered that with the beards, so that was good, so we've covered that for an action item. We have meeting minutes that we need to look to approve, I guess, from December 3rd and January 7th. I'll give you guys a second to pull out, I don't know if any of you.
Yeah,
have some. You
I had some changes. I just didn't remember what they were without. It was mainly about my position on the Clark Tavern, I think, because I.
So you can maybe get your edits to Evelyn if you
Yep,
wanted to.
I will.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and Richard?
I just had a couple on the January 7, and under review town meeting articles, about 2 sentences down, Mr. Peterson is of the opinion that the work-off amount should be raised from 500 to 1,000 and would help those seniors make up for the deductions they now face. However, it was noted from the assessors that they feel the overlay cannot handle this high of an increase. I didn't think the overlay, Mike, applied any longer.
Please, I'm sorry, I was
That's
talking
okay,
to
I'm sorry. The work-off program, it says here, it was noted that the assessors feel the overlay cannot handle this high of an increase. I thought the overlay no longer applied to that.
That was another, excuse me, I meant to tell you, that, after long discussion between the accountant, the assessors, the treasurer, they have decided to wait until there is some clear guidance from either the state or the IRS as to how to handle it, so they've withdrawn. They're just going to continue. They're just going to continue taking out of overlay, and I pulled that article from the warrant at their request.
That's fine. Page 3, also January 7, about halfway down the page, my report, we talked about the 4 holes to be filled in. They actually were on Main Street, not Adams Street. Adams Street was the tarring, and the 4 holes that are in 109 actually should be on Main Street. And then on Anita Daniels, it says a longtime resident. It says active with the kids. If you could just add, and with the senior citizens. That was the addition with that. And that was all.
I did find my copy and my notes on it, which, and my first one actually was that first thing that you cited, Richard. Mr. Peterson is of the opinion that the work-off amount should be raised from 500 to 1,000, and that is correct. And then it says that it would help those seniors make up for the deductions they now face. That's not really something that I expressed. I know that some people have expressed that. My feeling is just that we should give the seniors an opportunity to make more money to try to keep them in town. And I know there is this other issue of the fact that they're having deductions, but that wasn't my issue. And then the other thing had to do with my comments about the Clark Tavern. It says he favors the idea of the old building being reused. However, he feels a commercial building should not be in a residential neighborhood. And it's not so much that I don't feel that it just creates a conflict between the residential use and the commercial use. And that was the thing that I was trying to highlight. And it quotes me as saying I wouldn't want to live next door to a commercial building. That's probably true. But I think that it's just really that conflict between when you're in a neighborhood that's zoned residential, your expectation is that it's going to be residences next to you, and that our bylaw allows for this old building to be converted into a commercial use. So that was what I was trying to express.
All right. So we got that. So we have a motion to approve it.
I'll write it out. I'll write it out.
Strike the sentence.
Easier. So make a motion to accept them with the changes.
So moved. Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Yep.
Aye. All right. We've got the energy manager's grant application that I know we got to get cranking on. That we want to get.
Yeah, I've got to get together with that, but they just, it requires the Board of Selectmen sign, so if you could authorize the chairman to sign on your behalf.
So moved.
Yeah, I read that over. I agree with that. I will second that.
All in favor?
Yep.
Aye. Good. All righty. We have this, I think this is an annual thing too, that the Fire Chief Kingsbury requests the selectmen to vote to file a disclosure statement with the town clerk on his behalf. The chief, most people are sure aware, his son is a full-time firefighter, EMT, and the fire chief also serves on our municipal negotiating team in regards to fire department contracts. So we've got this disclosure form that needs to be filed, and you have to authorize the chairman of the selectmen to sign this.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
Now we have to take a vote to close the 2014 annual town meeting warrant.
I move to close the 2014 annual town meeting warrant.
I will second.
All in favor?
Yep.
Aye.
Okay. Licenses and permits. The Memorial and Wheelock School Committee is requesting permission to post signs advertising the annual Winter Carnival to be held on Saturday, March 15th.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Medfield Coalition for Public Education requests permission to post signs February 27th through the 14th of March, promoting the annual Spelling Bee fundraiser to take place on March 25th.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Yep.
Aye.
Good, okay. Medfield State Hospital status update. Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to vote to close the March 10th special town meeting warrant.
I move to close the March 10, 2014 special town meeting warrant.
I'm going to hold. I think there's a question.
Just a question, we haven't written the warrant article yet.
Yeah, there's three articles written.
Okay. I mean, I had talked to Mark about it, but I hadn't seen anything that came out.
Yeah,
They're still open for discussion, assume the wording of the warrant
Yeah.
article. Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
And they're written very general. so
They're
that
general
they
for
can-
the acquisition,
Yeah, we pretty.
Yeah.
pending the
Yeah,
legislation.
yeah.
Okay.
I just, yeah.
I think I have a copy in there, too.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
Aye.
Oh, I
Anything
just
else?
have,
Medfield
I
State
just have
Hospital?
one
Yes.
thing.
Sorry.
The monthly DCAM update meeting will happen this Thursday, the 6th. The last few meetings have been rescheduled due to snow.
Snow.
So my fingers are crossed. We're going
Oh.
to get this through on Thursday.
I mentioned Concom too.
Yeah, the reason why we're having the meeting is the DCAM is going to Concom on
Okay.
Thursday night. So we
Excellent.
figured it would be nice to have the update meeting before that.
Yep.
The other issue is the water tower legislation is out of Ways and Means.
Good.
We are hoping, of course, the snow may impact this. We are hoping for a roll call vote in the Senate on Thursday and a roll call vote in the House next Thursday. That schedule could move either way on both sides a couple of days,
Mhm.
pending the
Good.
next two snowstorms. But it
Getting
is a
there.
positive movement.
It's a long process.
I know, it's a positive movement. And that long process is what has me nervous about getting everything else in line, so.
Yeah. Good.
Was it a unanimous recommendation or? a
There
House
was
reservation?
there was no comment at bond hearing.
So
Good.
just
Which is good.
voted out, yeah.
Yep.
Excellent.
And the other thing I just want to touch on briefly, in your informational, there's an item from Ron Griffin regarding the memorials at the state hospital. And I've been working with DCAM on this the last few days, and there appears to be an issue that we were not all aware of, and that is those memorials are actually under the care and control of DMH. So even though the hospital property is under the care and control of DCAM, no memorials can be under the care and control of DCAM. So they are remaining with DMH. So we're working with DMH as to what do we do with them.
Exactly, okay.
But it's my understanding they have been located. But DCAM, I have been told they have been located.
Plaques?
Yes.
Oh, good.
I have not seen them, so I
afraid
always reserve judgment till I actually see them. But
they were all stolen.
no, it's my understanding that DMH does have them, and we'll have to work out what we're going to do with them and when and all of that.
Sure.
And it's similar to the cemetery, where even though DCAM has control of the state hospital, DMH must remain in control of the cemetery. So it's a similar issue where it's a monument.
Okay.
But apparently there is a whole statutory process to this that we will now start to follow regarding that. So I know every time I open one door, there's 6 more doors.
Oh my God. All we want is just, this is like, we're not asking for much.
We are working on it. I just, it's a little more complicated
right.
than I think it appears on the surface.
But it's great that at least you've got at least a little
So
bit
I've
of a
been told,
sort of
yes.
a road map, sort of.
Yeah.
That's good.
The other thing, I guess, to keep in mind as well is I think both of those memorials are on the access road, or what would be the access road, or very close to it, to the water tower land. So we'll have to think about that.
Yeah, it's my understanding that there's an issue because the town is going to acquire that property, that those memorials may not be allowed to go back on that property.
Wouldn't a logical place be to try to locate them in the cemetery?
I don't know, to be honest. There's going to have to be some sort of DMH process with this. But because we're acquiring the property, the memorials can't actually be turned over to the town.
Right.
And
They have
placed
to-
on town. I know. So that's just this little bit of,
Figure out something.
background work we're trying to do the last couple of days. So we have multiple people looking in to figure out exactly what to do, where are they, and how to fix
Well,
it.
thank you,
So-
thank
good
you for
news.
those efforts.
Yeah.
And the stones are still there.
Go through, but-
The stones are still there that they were taken off of, so.
Right, but the plaques are gone.
So that if the plaques are around, they could be remounted on those stones and the stones moved somewhere else.
And there apparently, and I haven't gone fully through this piece of it, but apparently, if there are living relatives to those people who the memorial serves, they have to be contacted for any issue, movement, and all of that. So,
Oh, I see what you mean, yeah. All
we're
right.
going to work directly with DCAM, and they've put me in touch with DMH to try and figure out how the best way is to handle this.
And I think on the local level, the community study memorials would be glad to work on that as well.
Yes, and I talked to Ron the other day and told them that I had some contacts at DCAM that were trying to figure this out, and I would let him know as soon as I heard anything.
Oh, actually, now they were employees, not patients, right?
Employees.
Both of them employees,
They
so
were.
maybe the cemetery wouldn't be appropriate then, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll have to figure out, I don't know. I'm not sure exactly how we're going to do it. Once I find out what the actual statutory process is, it'll make it a little easier to figure out where we can go with next.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it'll be,
Another one up there as well, and it's there's something in front of one of the buildings about a nurse
Mm-hmm.
in one of the wards, and I think that got raised the other day too.
Yeah.
Somebody's gonna have to take a look at that as well.
Yeah. So, initially I thought part of this restoration and the beautiful view of the Charles, when that land is going to remain with DCR, maybe it would be appropriate to put them along that pathway. So, but we'll try and come up with something, and I'll work with Monique if they do allow us to do that, to incorporate that into her design.
Good.
So.
That'd be nice. Excellent. All righty.
I started just jotting down some things that I thought that we're going to need to do before March 10. And the first thing was the school figures that I was taking up with the superintendent earlier. I think that we also need to someone needs to figure out the yearly taxpayer impact on the purchase, the way we did with
Yeah.
Redgate Farm.
I have that all done.
Oh, you've
Yeah,
got that?
we have
that. Yeah.
Okay. Can you maybe share that, circulate that around to us then? And then we probably need to get some information from the assessors in terms of the values of the land up at the hospital to give to the townspeople, I think.
There is one issue that we came up with in preparing the articles, when I went over them with town council. We can pass an override for the money to acquire the land. We don't believe you can pass an override to cover the security and maintenance costs.
So if we
Because
just be in the-
overrides are for debt exclusion unless you did it as an operating override, which becomes a permanent part of your base, which I'm not sure you'd want to do.
You know, Westboro did, Mike, fund it as a separate warrant article?
Right, the issue is still the appropriation. So where you still need to appropriate where that money will come from.
So I think we ended up with two articles for that, one for the operating cost and one for the capital cost. The operating cost, you can appropriate that annually, and that would be some incentive when it has to come up each year. I don't think you want to appropriate the whole thing at once, because it would be too much of a...
You don't even know what the number is yet, really.
Yes, so in a way it makes it a little bit better because you don't have to, the figures roll over from 100,000 to 900,000.
Right.
So this way
For
we
what?
can just, for the, how much it
Security.
would need. There was talk about having a 3-year schedule for appropriating a 3-year maintenance and security plan, funding for 3-year plan.
Mhm.
This way you'd probably do it year by year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to do it, but I had heard some very minimal numbers for, I thought that you had quoted, Chris, in terms of what the police chief thought and the fire chief thought and the DPW thought for...
The minimal numbers originally came from Westboro. I believe Westboro was 50,000 for the first year, and they went with the minimal number because they're not sure what it will involve. They also went with a very small number because they were hoping to sell that property off in a very short amount of time, so there should be very little care and control by the town of Westboro.
Have you had any discussions with the chiefs? And
I have. I met with, actually just met with Bob before this meeting, and we're not really sure. So we're kind of pick a number out of the air. We don't know, will it involve adding an additional police officer, changing the routes we drive? We're not really sure.
Okay.
There's nothing for us to really base that on.
Right.
The security numbers that come from DCAM are for 24/7 security, which is not something at this point the chief thinks is necessary.
No, I wouldn't think so either.
No.
Results haven't been very productive.
No, I would say it's, I'm not happy about having to pay back some of what we've paid for security up there because I don't think it's exactly very stringent. But, I'm going to say that most likely, we're going to try and come as close as we can to that number, but, we'll have to obviously look at it for the second year of what actually is the cost of carrying.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I think you probably need some funds too for, like boarding up windows or, replacing locks on doors.
I did talk to Ken about that.
That would be the DPW that would do that.
So there would be, so we may, and I need to talk to the accountant. It may be setting up a separate budget for the state hospital.
Yeah, that's actually not a bad idea, because that way you really know, it doesn't get thrown in with everything
Right.
else.
Well, unless you're keeping track of it as a sunk cost as well.
Yes.
Exactly.
That's true.
Position, you'll get,
Yeah, you really need to.
In terms of fire, it's very minimal for the fire chief because those buildings have been mostly condemned. He will not send any of our personnel into those buildings,
right.
so his maintenance is
So
going
if
to
there
be
was a
very
fire,
low.
they would just report but not do anything, basically. Yeah.
in terms of board up of the windows, what you'll have to do is replace wherever if somebody breaks in and pries up a window to get in there.
Yep.
Because last summer, not this summer, the summer before this summer, 2012, they pretty much went through and reboarded every window based on the complaints that we had up there about, open to the elements and what have you. So they spent probably close to $1 million on the cottages and taking the porches off and closing up all of the boarding, the boarding of the windows.
They also weren't doing, they were just ignoring a lot of stuff. I know that I told the security people about a door that was open on top of the public safety corrections training building up there, and they just ignored it. I don't think that the public safety people that were hired really had that much interest in preserving the property the way that the police in Medfield would have of making sure that there was nothing wrong going on up there. The other thing that I thought that we should do is review the insurance policy for the town to make sure that if we add this type of property that we make sure that it's covered. And then the last thing that I was thinking of was maybe having a list of FAQs for the town meeting so that we can get people answers to the main questions. And I don't know who's going to.
I believe the State Hospital Advisory Committee was talking about that last Thursday.
Yeah, good.
Roz and Steve Brown and somebody else were on the committee for
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe there's some discussion
Yeah, I'm
about
sure
that.
they've got that covered.
And I've been talking with the Steve Noel, negotiating chairman, and State Hospital Advisory Committee that the State Hospital Advisory Committee is planning on coming to one of your meetings to report back to you. Part of their charter was to determine, what their idea for a vision was and whether or not the town should purchase the property.
Yeah.
So I believe they'll be coming to you.
Pretty soon, I would say.
Yes.
That raises a question on 3 articles for town meeting. Who should sponsor those? Should it be the Board of Selectmen and the committee? Just the Selectmen,
I believe
just
it's
the
going to be
committee?
just the Board of Selectmen, because when you voted the term sheet, it was just the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
With DCAM, and you signed the agreement with DCAM, so I think it would make most sense for the Board of Selectmen.
How
to
is
do
that going to be worded so we don't have chaos at the meeting? We're voting to buy the property, we're not going to be debating what's going up there and everything, right?
No,
The issue is just to buy the property.
There's been some discussion as to I think you're going to end up with 2 opinions from the State Hospital Advisory Committee. I don't believe there's been an official vote taken yet, but just in some polling, I think you're going to end up with a positive and a minority report. I think there's some discussion as to whether or not the committee, if they come out supporting the purchase, they will be making a recommendation at the town meeting, and then you will also have the other half of the committee who does not support the purchase making a recommendation. Scott
The issue is to
McDermott.
buy or not to buy.
Correct.
Not, is it going to be a field or housing?
No, there's,
Too early, no.
Right.
there has been some discussion that the State Hospital Advisory Committee would like to talk about. These are some of the things that have come up during our visioning process, and this is what we see in the future. But as I've been saying, you're really taking the voters to take a leap of faith.
Right.
We can't guarantee what we're going to do with that property after the vote. We can just guarantee that the town's going to control it, not the Commonwealth. I think everybody had intention that we would go through this visioning process and be able to provide not only the question of buying the property, but what the vision would be at the special town meeting. Based on the timeline, and with the governor leaving in the fall, we don't have the opportunity for that. Our timeline became very, very quickly shortened.
Yeah.
So we are asking people to make that purchase for our controlling the property, not the state, which is basically the bottom line.
Right, exactly. No, we're just going to keep it very simple.
Scott McDermott, the town moderator, and I have been talking extensively as to how the meeting will function, because I think there will be some lively debate.
Well, I could see it get out of hand if we start
Right, and then, we're not going to get anywhere, with that. We'll have to, and I'm sure Scott will have to figure out how to keep it under control, because we'd be there for.
You better not forget to do that housekeeping and allow more than one speaker.
I know.
That's it.
Incidentally, the article to acquire the land at town meeting will require 2/3 vote.
Mm-hmm.
The override will be a majority at the election. Will be a majority. So.
Good. Alrighty.
One last comment, Mike. You were, I think Steve Nolan took an action to get you some numbers for possible use to give to the assessors so that they could take a look at putting a value. I mean, I don't know if he's gotten it to you or not.
I haven't seen anything
he
yet.
took that action.
but I
Remember
will
the
get it.
after the meeting last month?
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
That'd be helpful, yeah.
Pete, Selectmen's report.
The Medfield Coalition against Medfield Coalition for Abuse Prevention, MCAP, I think that's what it is going to run they're going to run a parent program, and they're just figuring that out at the moment. We're going to meet again either this week or next week. The office hours that I had last month at the center actually ended up having a lot of the discussion that Roberta had here tonight about the town. She and Tony came and talked to me about that plan that they put forward for the 55 and over housing. I was just going to go back and mention about the visioning, the Medfield State Hospital visioning session, and what a remarkable event that was. That was just so well done, so far exceeded my expectations as to what it was going to produce, and I was just very pleased. I just wished it had been broadcast on TV. I know that there was a concern that because there were so many breakout groups that it wouldn't make good television, but I think it could have worked on, but it wasn't. So if you weren't one of the 100 that were there, just believe me, it was very well done, and it was very informative. Lyme disease committee reports 29 deer the first year, 29 deer the second year, 40 deer this year.
Excellent.
No complaints. They've actually stopped a lot of illegal hunters in town, which is one of the side benefits of having an active hunting program going on in town. That we're weeding out the illegal hunters, and apparently there are a fair number of them, unfortunately. I've been to a couple of energy committee meetings, and they're mainly going forward with that Green Communities Act initiative, and they're interested in doing the solar on the town-owned land as well. There was the Eagle Scout ceremony with Peter Wayland that was nicely done. The Woodland Theater invited me to be on stage with them, that was kind of fun to do. See the play from the stage. Did they give you a hard word through?
No, I was. Were you on? I was on Saturday night. I was up twice. My first word was a really tough one to spell. It was cow. I was able to pull that off.
They had cow in our production too.
So I got that through, and then they gave me the second word when they wanted to kick me off. Was some word that was like, you know what the heck.
Yeah, I knew that my time had come when the second word came.
Yeah.
And then they had a lot of fun with Jim Timothy. They made him.
Was he the last person standing?
He was the last one standing, and then he was very successful. And then they just kept giving him words, and he was a good sport. And that's it.
Richard.
A couple of things. One, as you know, in watching the Super Bowl, the former Medfield resident coach, Pete Carroll, won his championship. Yep. He was such a positive force in this town as a member of the community, contributed greatly, financially to the schools. His kids all went to the schools. I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we send a letter to Mr. Carroll on behalf of the town of Medfield, just congratulating him as a former resident of the town of Medfield. He just was a class act person when he was here. So I make a motion, we send a letter from the town of Medfield just congratulating him.
Second.
All in favor?
Yep.
I was able to go to the mini town hall for January, which was up on Maplewood Road at the home of John and Mary Harney. Just a couple of issues. They had some issues with snow plowing. I actually talked to Bobby Kennedy about, they had some concerns at the end of Cedar Lane. There's a cul-de-sac that the town owns that's very much overgrown. They had some concerns about speeding on Pine Street and feeling it's very dangerous coming out of Maplewood because of the bend in the road, not to see there. We had 16 people. It was a nice crowd.
It was a nice crowd.
There was it was interesting. A couple of people had concerns about the water. Some said there was a strong chlorine taste and the smell in the water, and yet someone that lived right next door said they had no issue at all. Two neighbors on Cedar and two on Maplewood living next to each other. One said they had the problem, the other said they had no problem.
Evelyn and I go through this all the time. She notices the chlorine in the water. I couldn't tell you if there was a gallon
mine seems
in it.
fine. But it's interesting how one resident and then next door, there's no issue at all on that. We filled in, we talked about numerous issues, the state hospital. What struck me is all the attention, and Bill, you'll appreciate this, of all the years you've been working on the state hospital. I had one of the residents unaware of what was going on at the state hospital, so that's why I think the more we can advertise this, the better. I went to the aesthetics committee concerning the project of the sidewalk on the former Lord's property. And Mike, if you can help just trying to keep tabs with Roach Brothers on that. But here's the issue, And there's probably no one in the town as strong of a supporter of planting trees and keep trees than myself. But both Ken and the engineer, and then I went to Mike Leaders, their suggestion is to remove the 5 trees that are currently there for a number of issues. The roots, they feel, are not the proper urban trees because the roots go under the sidewalk and begin to lift the sidewalks up. They're growing now. It's hard to see what the signs are and the businesses that are there. And in talking with Mike Leaders, he said the tree probably has about 10 years of life left. And he suggested that the sidewalk is all going to be dug up. This would be the best time to do it. So 10 years from now, we're not going back and redigging the sidewalk up. He suggested a type of tree called a lilac tree that the roots grow down. And he suggested maybe 4 trees there instead of the 5, and put the 5th one somewhere else downtown. But I believe that would have to be a meeting with the tree warden to take trees down.
Yeah, just the tree warden. It's not a scenic way, I don't think so. I don't think it would require planning board action, just the tree warden, so.
But
The
it just,
tree warden will have to have a hearing, though.
yeah, and I hope people will come out. It just seems to be the right time. The trees will be replanted. Ken feels there's money in the tree budget to put the trees back in there. And he said it's not like, you look at pictures of downtown Medfield in the 1890s and you have the massive trees, but he said it wasn't cemented and tarred, and you didn't have the stress on the trees that you do on these trees here today. Yeah. So that may be an issue. I just wanted to raise that.
Yeah, if you have a place like this area in front of Town Hall where you got enough grass so that they can get the moisture, they do fine. But if you get a little holes, a foot wider than the tree,
Right.
they just can't get the nourishment. So, and they throw up the sidewalk, and you have ADA issues, and
Right.
it's a lot of things that are different.
So all of us attended the Mass Municipal Association convention. Just quickly, I went to 3 different ones. One was called Planning Ahead, Smart Growth and Sustainability. It was interesting. It talked about the different trends here in Massachusetts. The information they said was that those born after 1990 are looking for more urban settings, smaller houses, less car use. Therefore, we need to have greater availability of travel on bike, walking, and transit. They talked about increase in sidewalks, and maybe something after town meeting we need to look at here in Medfield where additional sidewalks perhaps are going to be needed. My own mind, that stretch from Pound Street to the shops down by Shaw's and stuff is a gap that's getting in there.
Yeah, I've had a couple of calls about that, and that's going to take a lot of work. That's quite, because all of the water that collects on 109 has to go, drains into that swamp that eventually feeds into the brook behind the high school football field and goes under South Street. So if you put curbing in and sidewalks, you trap that water. So you have to put drainage in there.
And it becomes expensive.
And it becomes quite a design project. That may be one that, because of the volume of traffic, you could get funding from the state to do, but it's going to be quite a design
I'd
work.
like maybe after town meeting to look at that. Maybe we can pull in our state reps and senator to see if
I think that would be a good project for them to take a look, particularly with the volume of traffic that road gets.
I see a lot of people walking that distance there.
The other one that suggested was that we run a sidewalk up on the other side of Main Street from where it ends.
Up to the Peak House?
Up to the Peak House,
Yeah, that's needed as well.
Yeah.
It was interesting, the statistics. Massachusetts, we're aging. 14% are senior citizens now. It's going to get up to 21% by 2030. So it was interesting just in the statistics.
That's the baby boom generation.
We're aging.
Yep.
The second was on rebuilding the New England community as a healthy community. This was real interesting and a little scary. 23% of American youth are now obese. And what do we need to do? Again, they get into the sidewalks, more investment in our parks, wellness programs in our schools, condition of our bridges, which raised the question is, and I know the Senate delayed this, United States Senate delayed this for a year, but is any of Medfield involved in the new floodplain? Has that impacted us?
No, they're very, very minuscule changes. I don't think they're...
That didn't affect us.
No, see, most of that land is already bought by the Army Corps of Engineers, and we've had zoning in place for years, floodplain zoning.
So none of that changed?
The only one, I did have a call from a resident who went to refinance, and because a portion of his lot was in the floodplain, he was denied refinancing, and he was asking what the procedures were to have, the floodplain boundaries amended, or I think what you actually do, you get a waiver for a certain...
Yeah, letter of map amendment.
Amendment, yes.
Where you can show that your property is not, the
Yes.
physical structure is not in the floodplain.
It's not in the floodplain.
Even if part of your backyard is, you're not.
Yes, but that was an existing one. It wasn't a new one. He just happened to run into it because he went to refinance.
Sure.
Okay, so we're not impacted at all?
Not really. It was mainly the coastal areas.
Yeah.
The city of Boston had quite a bit of land they put in, but all those, Hingham and Cohasset and Hull and all those towns down the Cape.
But it didn't deal with interior rivers and things like that?
It does, but see, we, because the floodplain of the Charles has been acquired for flood storage, and we have Vine Brook, the only one in Medfield that they actually have gone out and done it by reach. A reach is a certain area of a brook where they do it, and they actually survey to establish the floodplain boundaries. The only one they've done that in Medfield is Vine Brook, and they have that by reach. The rest of them are done by elevation. They use the elevation of the Charles River. I think 125 feet is the basic. So, thankfully, we've had very good floodplain zoning in place for a long time.
Okay. And the third one, which I thought was very interesting, was on capital planning, affording the big stuff. And they use the town of Arlington. They appropriate 5% of their budget each year to go to the capital budget. And every year that's replenished, so 5%.
Look at that. Boy, we could have some really
I think
fancy
you vote
new
on that right
trucks.
now.
Nice new trucks.
Richard, we do, right now, we're doing about, 12, 14%, somewhere in that area. Because you add the debt service cost, the annual debt service, so we're way above that.
Well, they have a rolling 5-year plan, and then every year 5% goes on to the capital budget. So I thought it was interesting how they planned that out.
I got his materials maybe 6 months ago, and I gave them to Gus Murby.
On the Arlington guy?
Yeah, because I asked the guy, I told him what we were doing, and he said that they just couldn't do it without 5% every year.
I went to the Council of Aging committee. I mentioned that. It's interesting, and I think the first Thursdays was a kind of a jump start. But there's a number of other programs we have going in Medfield that are privately run, and I attended. The Thomas Upham House runs a monthly program called Healthy Breakfast Speaker Series.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to that. They had a speaker talk about John F. Kennedy and the role of Kennedy in the Bay of Pigs. And then the First Parish Church runs a last Monday of the month series. And they had local Medfield resident Mark Samuels, who's the executive director of American Experience. Mm-hmm. And he gave us a preview and spoke on the new documentary that's coming out called Shunned, dealing with the Amish. Mm-hmm. And he showed us the first 45 minutes of that. And that's coming up. But they're going to do every last Monday. And then the Hannah Adams Club, I went to today over at the UCC Church, and they have a speakers program. The guy was great on Eleanor Roosevelt. So we got just some nice cultural activities that I think this first Thursday has kind of driven to get going. I continue to attend although I missed this morning's, the DPW garage meetings. It appears they've brought on the construction vice president that now is on board. They're a little bit behind schedule, mainly because of the very cold weather and the snow, and his job is trying to get him back onto schedule, although they did say they have no doubt they will stick to that August deadline. So that seems to be going well. And the last thing, I did attend Representative Denise Garlick's report to her district that was here. She does a nice job summarizing what went on over the past year and different ways that she's working with the town of Medfield. So that's what I've been doing.
Good. I did a taping a couple weeks ago with Jack Peterson down at Medfield TV, so that was good. And so we'll see when that, I haven't seen it yet, if it's come out yet or not on cable and stuff. But we had a good, nice. Good. And Woodland Theater was very good. I think we had a great time. And the next big thing to finish up the season is in May 15th or so, is a Fiddler on the Roof. So that's always a biggie and stuff like that.
Remarkably good, Mark. I was very impressed.
Yeah, it's the actors are really good. You get much more appreciation when you're up on stage with them and you're trying not to look like a fool while they're running around singing and jumping on the chairs and jumping over you and stuff like that. It was pretty good. It was really pretty good. A couple other things too. What was I going to say? Last night, and Pete was there too, with the Medfield Historical Society, little presentation on Medfield State Hospital. So they had some folks that had grown up in Medfield during the time and lived on the property and stuff like that. So it was very nice to hear them kind of reminisce about that. And old Medfield was really tiny. Those brothers, Daryl and Dan or something like that.
Daryl and
David, is it?
Daryl and David,
the DDs.
Yeah, it's like they're like.
And then their sister, their younger sister was with them too.
Yeah, it's like a comedy team they've got. The guys are pretty funny and stuff. They were really quite hilarious. The at the MMA, I just gave copies for you guys too that you can have. But I went to a thing on pavement management and stuff, and it was very interesting because Ken Feeney got mentioned a couple times. He's a big gun with paving, you know.
Oh, yeah,
everyone knows Ken. The David Knowlton, who's I guess the president of the DPW superintendents this year, the organization that they all belong to, Ken and them all belong to, and then Robert O'Brien from the town of Walpole did a presentation on this pavement management software they use, and Ken's name came up a couple times, and particularly talking about sealing them, protecting the roads, and doing the sealing with the chips and stuff like that, and preventative maintenance. So he.
Well, Ken Ken ran when they had Bristol, Plymouth, and Middlesex Highway Association.
Yeah.
Ken really was the mainstay of that. They ran it, and actually Edie Fernal was the mainstay of it. She did all the work for Ken, but Ken took the credit. So.
Yeah. But he came up. So just in case you guys wanted to know that when they do your road, when they put the chips down, they oil it. It's a little bumpy for a few years and stuff like that. All the other towns now do that too. With the roads a little rough. But those are Nantucket chips. Those are that's what they're referred to and stuff like that. It's very nice, very nice material. Yeah. So they came up with a fancy name for.
I've tried that; it doesn't work very well.
So it was pretty good, but it was good. It was a great. Oh, the most important thing was at lunch, when I went to lunch at the MMA, the table I was sitting at. Yeah, I was sitting with Southwick, town of Southwick, the selectmen there. Their selectmen, I think we're going to have to talk about. They make good money. Yeah, their selectmen. I think it was like $8,000 a year. Isn't that something, huh? For the selectmen, huh? Yeah, and they had done a survey, and that was comparable, they said, to the surrounding towns. So isn't that something, huh? So a little different from $900.
I will have to add you to my reclassification plan.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But I was stunned when they came up with that. It was pretty good. And there was someone from Georgetown was sitting next to us. Georgetown, they get 0. So at least we're doing a little bit better than that.
So you're the median.
I was going to say you're the median.
Yeah. But I was just stunned at that. What they got, and that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money.
I was fascinated with that selectman we met who was from Chilmark, was it? Yeah. And their problem was that they have all these Wall Street types who have zillions of dollars and occasionally expect all kinds of weird things.
Well, plus he had the president coming.
Oh,
to-
yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you didn't, yeah, they didn't.
President visiting.
And the
Yeah.
Secret Service closed down one of their streets and
Yeah.
just said, this is the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't have much use for the Secret Service, did they, the
They
town in
didn't seem
general?
to-
No,
Well,
no.
didn't they say
Sure.
the federal government doesn't pay for anything?
Nothing, no, you're on your own for
Yeah,
any of
so
the police
from-
details
yeah.
and stuff like that. When the president comes, you gotta foot the bill yourself. No reimbursement, yeah.
Well,
All right.
Happy shoveling.
Yes. So I think we're all set. I think we covered the informational thing, so that was good. And so I think we're done. Good, excellent.